Hey there! What you're about to hear is an in-depth, spoiler-filled conversation about the recent Naughty Dog title, The Last of Us 2. If you have not played or experienced the game and do not wish to hear spoilers about the story or different aspects of this game, you are advised not to listen to this podcast until after you have done so. But quickly before we begin, I want to remind you that the Crunchy Take podcast is available on Spotify, YouTube, Radio Public, Google Podcasts, and now Apple Podcasts. So if you like what you hear, consider subscribing or following to hear these episodes as soon as they go live. Thank you so much for stopping by and enjoy the podcast. Hello and welcome all to the Crunchy Take podcast. My name is James Kittapel, and I am joined by a good friend of mine to discuss the nitty-gritty of The Last of Us 2. But before we get into it, Aidden Tapia, thanks for coming on, man. How's it going?
What's up, James? I'm doing great. How are you?
Dude, it is such a pleasure to have you on. But before we get into The Last of Us, can you give us a brief summary of who you are and your background in gaming, the kind of games you liked as a kid, and what has shaped you up until this point?
No, yeah, absolutely. But first, let me just say thanks again for having me on. It's a great opportunity. I've been really excited and appreciative. I will say, so just brief introduction. My name is Aidden. I am a I'm a senior in college, and I'll be graduating very soon. Right now I'm from Chicago. So right now I'm just home due to the pandemic and stuff, and I'm just playing a lot of games, watching a lot of movies, doing stuff I love. In terms of my gaming life, games have been a part of my life since I was like 3 years old, from plug and plays and arcades back when they were big around the city, to where I am now, which is more focused on like games journalism, games criticism, and I'm very passionate about that. So like when I first started out, I think my first console ever was a Game Boy SP, and it was a SpongeBob one. I remember that. I think I still have it in the garage. And I played Super Mario World, and I was blown away. I really enjoyed it. And even as a 4-year-old, I was told that like, oh, I was pretty good at Super Mario World and like platforming games. And then I started moving toward this next gen of consoles, the DS, the Xbox, the GameCube, then eventually the PS2. And that's when things really started kicking off for me.
PS2, my man. It's exactly the same console I had.
Yeah, things like Spyro, Ratchet and Clank. And then the PS3 is when I finally made my first ever gaming account, because I used to share consoles with my parents and my siblings. But then the PS3 was finally like my own, and I made my own account. And I started being able to buy my own games and refine my taste. And that came into full fruition toward PlayStation 4, which is the next gen and where we are still right now. I will say I did kind of have that phase in middle school and in the front half of high school, where all I kind of played was just AAA titles, primarily first-person shooters, things like Call of Duty, Battlefield, and anything like that. Anything with guns, blood, and gore. Young kids, especially boys, are going to eat that up, and that's all I did. So at first, I used to use games as an outlet to hang out with friends, but now I'm more focused and more refined on. Yes, I still play with my friends, but I've started to realize that gaming, it's not just really a phase for me that I'll carry through my adolescence. I really am passionate about games as art and games as a medium for storytelling and such, even more beyond just games being quote unquote fun and that being their sole purpose. So that's kind of where I'm at right now. And that's kind of like my brief history of games. I guess if we could get a little into it more, like Last of Us, just to preface, Last of Us 1 from 2013 was my favorite game of all time for a very long time.
I was about to ask.
My favorite game of all time, yeah.
I was about to ask, like, 2013. What game would you... Okay, well, aside from The Last of Us 1, what game before that was kind of the benchmark as to, okay, this is either the standard that you held it to was the first... You said Super Mario World was the first game that blew you away.
Yeah, that was like the first game I ever played. I will say there's 3 games or series that come to mind when I think about like the benchmark and the thing that Last of Us just surpassed for me. But first came the BioShock trilogy, starting off with the first one, title in 2007. Absolutely terrified me as a young child, but as I got a little more courageous to get through the opening, I realized that it was incredibly atmospheric and fantastic. Although the gameplay's a little rough, I realize now. And then Infinite was fantastic, and it really showed me like how games could pack a lot of narrative punch. And that only further expanded for me when I played the Mass Effect trilogy on the Xbox 360. I was absolutely blown away by the Mass Effect trilogy. Every single installment just better and better, and they're some of my favorite games, and that's also why I came to love RPGs and stuff like that as well. Things like beyond the video game console, things like D&D and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
And one more would have to be Skyrim, in terms of stemming a little away
Yep.
from the narrative side of things and more toward just games,
Mm-hmm.
adventure, and exploration and what they can be. I hold Skyrim as a very high standard of that.
Yeah. I love that you brought up BioShock, especially BioShock
Hmm.
Infinite, because there's, I guess there's a lot for me while watching. Fortunately, I don't have a PS4. I grew up with a PS2, but it's just PC has pretty much dominated my life. But
Right.
BioShock Infinite, I feel, has a lot of, you could draw a few parallels, especially with the dichotomy between the two characters in Last of Us. There's a lot of, I feel like there's some similarity as far as emotional gut punch. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, there's definitely stuff there that I hopefully want to get into.
Mhm.
Is there a game that you've picked up within the last few months since quarantine happened that you like? Oh wow, this is a surpriser pick.
Yeah, absolutely. So my 2019 was pretty uneventful. I'll say that.
In
I
terms
didn't
of
play a lot
gaming,
of games. I played, yeah,
gotcha.
because I usually am playing catch up on games that I missed the previous year,
Mhm.
and 2020 is no difference. So I play a lot of 2019 titles this year. The first one that I played that was really critically acclaimed, besides Sekiro and Devil May Cry 5, which I both think are exceptional, except they don't really have much in the vein of story and storytelling. I
Mhm.
picked up Outer Wilds, not Outer Worlds,
Outer
Outer Wilds.
Worlds, okay.
Yeah, or not Outer Worlds, Outer Wilds. It's called Outer
Oh
Wilds. So
shoot,
like
there's an
that,
Outer Worlds
yeah,
too. It's not the Fallout 4 kind of. It's not the
yeah,
Fallout clone, right? Or
yeah. Outer Worlds is the one made of Obsidian. That's like the RPG
gotcha.
Fallout type one. There's one called Outer Wilds
Outer
that's about
Wilds.
space exploration, and it's
Oh
really good.
yeah,
It's got a lot of 2001: Space Odyssey
I think
vibes,
I've
which is one
heard
of my
of it.
favorite
Yeah, yeah,
ones.
yeah. Okay,
There was another title
sweet.
called Subnautica that also didn't offer much in the
Oh,
realm of story, but it absolutely blew me away. I kind of left this out in my little bio part. I'm an environmental science major at Taylor, so I've really always appreciated nature and discovery and science, and Subnautica just really speaks to me on that level. But the
interesting.
one game I played since quarantine started that absolutely blew me away and wriggled its way up into my top 5 favorite games is a title called Disco Elysium.
It's
It was
Coliseum.
getting,
Okay.
yeah, it was getting a lot of critical acclaim, and that stuff typically attracts me. And it's an RPG where you play a detective in the fallout of the Eastern European Communist Revolution, and it
Recently
is just,
released.
yes, it was released, I believe, on the tail end of 2019.
Okay.
It swept at the Game Awards and the BAFTAs for storytelling, best indie game, things like that. It's phenomenal. I strongly recommend it for anyone that loves RPGs. It's a little different, but I just strongly recommend it. You got to check it out.
Yeah, the past few, I'd say 2020. I mean, it's pretty. It's been a pretty somber year for a lot of people, right? I mean, we've
Oh
not
yeah.
had a lot of hope, which is, um, a theme. And then like things happen here and there, but I feel like in the gaming world, for the most part, we've seen some really amazing things happen at maybe the cost of some of these developers. You have to imagine the crunch that these people go through just to make things like this happen. For me,
Oh,
that
absolutely.
game would be, because I never played it back in the day, it would be GTA 5 when it was released.
Mm.
I actually got it for free. A friend of mine gifted it to me, and this was a week before the the Epic decided to
Oh,
release it for
before it
free.
went free.
Yeah, before it went free. But my friend was so nice; he gave me a copy with like $2 million on the online. So I'm like, okay, cool.
Awesome.
Yeah, so GTA 5, that campaign is, while it's not immediately in my top, it's like, wow, there's a story there. Like,
Oh yeah.
especially when it got to this one, when it got to the Trevor bit, I played it for nine
He's a
hours straight.
wild
I
guy.
played it for 9 hours straight. Like that it was just so fun. All
Trevor's wild.
right.
I've been playing a lot of GTA Online during quarantine. Sorry to cut you off. I've been playing a
No,
lot
no,
of
you're good.
GTA Online. It is phenomenal. The community is thriving so much, and they have so much passion for the game, and you can really just do anything you want. Rockstar is just so good at that,
I would just
and I'm really
hope that for
appreciative
this
of
next game for 2023 or 2022, I think was when GTA 5 set to come out. I would hope they really, if they're gonna do online play, I would just hope that they utilize they what's the word? They make the UI more friendly and
that.
they make
Yeah,
the
user
online more,
friendly.
I don't
Yeah,
know, playable because
it's
it
like
takes
it's like
forever to
Hulu.
load. Yeah.
Hulu's got so much good stuff.
Oh,
Like they just added Parasite, but I'll be damned if I can figure out how to use that app.
yeah. Because
It's
with
so
Rockstar, you cannot add friends from desktop. You have to add it while you're in the game. It's just like, yeah, it's very archaic,
yeah,
very 2000, early 2010. So I'm hopefully
for sure.
they switch directions. All right, let's get right to it, Aiden. The Last of Us 2. It's a game that
Yeah,
has
that is a
garnered
that's
a
very
lot of controversy. I think honestly, this might be the most controversial release of a game that I can remember in recent history. In recent
yeah,
gaming
I
history, or even entire gaming history. Like I can't think of another time
yeah,
when it was this concentrated in terms of emotion and
yeah.
feeling.
Yeah, I haven't been alive very long, obviously. But and I haven't been that active in the gaming community seriously for a long time, probably for the last decade or so. And I really have never seen, I won't say outrage because there's definitely a lot of positivity in the madness here with this game, but just the amount of craziness and chaos and all the hecticness of it. It's if I can think of something to rival it, it would probably be, I mean, Fallout 76 is kind of the low-hanging fruit, but, you know, you can just
Yeah,
gut punch that game, get away with it. I would probably say the Mass Effect 3 ending. A lot of people were just massively upset with that. I'm not sure if you're familiar. I won't go
I
into
am sort
detail,
of
but that
familiar, and
it just everyone was so
Andromeda
upset.
kind of came out to the same
Yeah,
thing, and
yeah.
I think honestly the last where the it may not have been the gaming community itself, but just like the outcry of people reacting to a video game. For me, would honestly be the early days of GTA.
Yeah.
Because I don't know, I'm 25, so like I'm not that old, but gaming, you can pretty much summarize gaming within the last 25 to 30 years. You know,
Really, yeah, for sure.
significant games that are benchmarks. And within that time span, there have been controversies here and there, like studios screwing over people, EA with loot boxes and microtransactions stuff. But GTA, I feel like that's the closest thing I can get to what this currently is. Um, it's just like the outcry
Yeah.
from people that don't understand what the video game is, and misconceptions about the video game. And
Oh,
the
yeah.
I think the ability, what bothers me most currently is the fact that, yeah, people are going to disagree about a video game, but currently the community of video game players and critics and journalists, it's like no one knows how to talk to each other. It's almost like politics, in
Yeah,
my
it's
opinion.
getting to that point. It's almost like, you know, a
Yeah.
lot of people are starting to say that video games are just becoming movies where like the Rotten Tomatoes score is exponentially higher than the user score.
Hmm.
And people are just, you know, it's, oh, keep your politics out of my games. Oh, they're being overly politicized. And
Yeah.
it's starting to get there now. And I think I take it almost as a good sign because it shows me that video games are starting to work their way onto the
Hmm.
level and garner respect that I think they deserve in terms of storytelling and narrative. You know, on the same, I treat video games,
Yeah.
maybe not all of them, because some games aren't as narratively focused as Naughty Dog games. But for those that have a narrative element, you know, I treat them on the same level as movies, as books,
Hmm.
music albums, such. So I think that's just a sign that they're getting there. And I think an interesting contrast between this and GTA is that, you know, The Last of Us 2 honestly might be more violent than
It is
GTA,
100% more violent. We'll get into that in
but
a little bit. Yeah, just like
yeah, absolutely. But
it's
not no one's talking about that now. They're talking about a lot of other things. So
yeah.
I think that are very interesting, and we can get into that later.
I love the fact, The Last of Us 2, the reason I wanted to talk to someone so badly about this whole week, man, has been me just like holding it in. I've been going to work almost. The last game to do this to me, and it's topical that you brought it up, was Bioshock Infinite. The ending
Mhm.
to that game, I'm not going to spoil it, but it left me sitting there in front of the computer, just like staring at the screen, being gut punched, like not knowing really how to process.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
just love stuff like this where it makes you disagree with yourself. And for other people, they may have. I would almost rather be in the camp of either 100% for and 100% against. For me, it's like, this is one of those times where I see something like this and it makes me disagree with myself. You know?
Mhm.
Yeah. Well, first question I have, take me back to when the game jumped to credits. So when the game first ended, what was your initial feeling?
So you gotta understand, James, when I first played Last of Us 1, I was I just turned 14, and
Ah, yeah, you were Ellie's
I
age.
just resonated so much with Ellie
Hmm.
because she's a young teenage girl, and I resonated so much with her like rebellious spirit and her confusion in the I'm sorry, in the fallout of the cordyceps, pandemic, and she resonated so strongly with me, and to see her turn in, and we'll get into this obviously, but to see her turn into this almost like a monster and lose everything. My jaw hit the floor, but I also felt tears welling up in my eyes at the
Yeah,
same time because I was so taken aback that Naughty Dog was able to take this character that I absolutely adored and change my perspective on her overall. And when the credits first hit, um, the song sums it up. I've been listening to the soundtrack and all. The song is called Beyond
Beyond
Despair
Desolation.
or Beyond Desolation. There you go. And
Yep.
it
I
is just
you're pretty much mirroring what I'm thinking right now is because that
yeah,
track it
it's just
stuck out. You see the Naughty Dog trailer, Naughty Dog logo at the end. It's like, oh, what
oh yeah, it
what's
is.
going on?
It's a lot of people have been using the phrase gut punch, almost annoyingly so because they use it so often, but that was a complete gut punch for me. I was just like, damn, this
Yeah,
game really doesn't this game, Last of Us 1, a lot of people say it's a happy ending. I disagree, but it does leave you feeling good because you got closure and a resolution there.
yeah.
And this one, it's not as fulfilling, or I will say it's very fulfilling, but it's certainly not as straightforward. You really
Hmm.
have to dig deep and go, man, like what really happened here?
Yeah.
You don't need a explained ending explained video for Last of Us 1, but I've been seeing a lot of ending explained videos for Last of Us 2, and there's just so much to unpack. There's so much emotion, and it really spoke to me on how games have just matured and how, games like Call of Duty are rated M because they have a mission in it where you waste a whole airport. That's about it,
Yeah.
and they add blood and enemies just 'cause it's
Oh
war.
yeah, the
So,
no Russian part. That's like
yeah,
that's the
that's
last
another
honestly,
that's
besides
another
GTA, that's the last like real the news was talking about it, you
yeah,
know?
oh yeah. Last of Us 2 has that rated M, not just because it's abhorrently violent, but because you need to have so much emotional maturity to be able to wrestle with this game, and its ending is no different. It's so heavy, and we can unpack that as we go through the rest of the story because that's where all the puzzle pieces kind of fall. But I was absolutely shocked, and I will say I knew right then and there. I didn't have to think twice. I thought to myself, "This is the best game I've ever played in my life,"
Oh.
which is why I use the phrase Last of Us 1 was my favorite game of all time. Now
Oh.
it's Last of Us 2. I think it's the best game I've ever played.
I think it kind of reminds me of these other great franchises slash pieces of art that either I think a telltale sign of a significant piece of art or whatever or creation is that you're either gonna have people um that are in the camp and appreciate it and really love it for what it is, or are complete it just missed the mark for. That's I feel like
Yeah,
that's what I feel like a lot of things are. Like Harry Potter. There's a lot of people that love it. There's a lot of people, but there's also a lot of people that absolutely can't stand
yep.
it. Just like with Lord of the Rings. But The Last of Us 2, I feel like do you feel like people were on the same page when they booted up this game? Do you feel like the gaming community spoiler talk, the leaks and everything else aside, like the 2-day embargo, everything aside, just talking about the game and the story, do you feel like people were on the same page as far as like how they felt about Joel and Ellie and all the other characters that we knew?
Yeah, I will say, yeah, I think everyone's on the same page because, um, everyone is kind of now on the same page about the fallout of Joel because the people that are upset about what happens to Joel, which as if you don't know, obviously they kill off the protagonist from the previous game, Joel, who we've,
Hmm.
known and love. Uh, they kill him off in the first hour of the game in a brutal fashion, and we can talk more about that later, I'm sure. But essentially, the people that expected Joel in this game is nearly everyone. So I will have to say they were probably on the same page going into it. However, I certainly wasn't because I couldn't fight the urge to theory craft, and think about, what's going to happen in this story. I did the same for Endgame almost exactly a year ago. I was like, oh my God,
Yeah,
Tony's going to die in this way at this point in the story. Cap's
yeah.
going to die in this way at this point in the story. And I did the same for Last of Us 2, and I will say I fully expected Joel to die at some point. At
Yeah.
some point in the story, I fully expected it just because it's that mentor figure that eventually just dies. But I will say I did not expect him to be a big part of the game. I'll say I'll be ahead of the curve on that one because the marketing is pretty clear that this is Ellie's game. And I think people
Right.
got really caught up in that. Every single gameplay demo and every single trailer screams that this is Ellie's game, not Joel's.
Yeah. I think it's well, here's another question to consider. This whole week I've been looking at obviously in the wake of the ending, you look for any reprieve, and I'm glad that for the most part, the more mature critics on YouTube, I have they're kind of starting to sway the conversation into a more artistic conversation, where
Right.
we can actually digress, where we can actually break apart, wait, what works, what doesn't work when talking about art, instead of just this screaming match that
Right.
really occurs every single time something like this happens. But um do you think Joel is a quote unquote beloved character?
I have to say yes, just because Joel's arc is of redemption
Hmm.
in Last of Us 1. Last of Us 1 is about the struggle of humanity. I coined the phrase kind of humanity versus humans. So kind of differentiate that there because Last of Us 1, the world of Last of Us is not a happy place. It
Hmm.
sucks. It is brutal. And that's because humans are trying to survive. It's kind of like the way of nature, right? And that's only reinforced by all the natural imagery, the cordyceps fungus being biological, not synthetic. Um, it just screams, Mother Nature, and Mother Nature's not pretty. However, Joel, when he chooses to, massacre that hospital, it's because Ellie makes him more than just an animal. He makes him feel human, and it rekindles his that love, that fatherly love,
Yeah.
for
I
his
guess when I
daughter, and
say
that's why I love.
beloved, so yeah. I guess when I say beloved, I was watching. I hate that certain things make me think a certain way, but like the Cosmonaut Variety Hours is another YouTuber I look at. He made the comparison that Joel is really he's like a deathly violent anti-hero that we grow to love in The Last of Us,
Yeah,
you know? Whereas
yeah,
like if we're being like we talk about beloved characters, if in a weird way, the both of them, Joe and Ellie, in the first game combine into one character or one idea that we love. And like it's because of their dichotomy, their relationship, that they're each of them are bearable, because
yeah.
I
That is
can't
a really interesting thought. I hadn't thought of it like that. They do complement each other really well in that contrast. It could I kinda see that point. The contrast between them and the banter is more we're attached to than the characters
yeah.
themselves. I would disagree, but I can totally see that point. 'Cause I love Joel. I also am just a sucker for, like, the grizzly, ruffled country guy, Texas
Yeah.
bearded guy with that can be really violent, but really sweet at the same time type
Here in
vibes.
Texas,
Kinda like Logan, you know?
yeah. I mean, oh, jeez, that's a you can't help but wonder, like, what is the chief inspirer of all these different
Oh, yeah.
forms of art that have come out within the past, like, because you've had God of War, kid and dad story, you've had Logan, father daughter story, Last of Us, it just keeps it goes on, and like,
Yeah.
I don't feel like you can pinpoint any one thing, but earlier you said, you spent this much time playing The Last of Us 2, and when you get to the ending, it's just like such a jarring, like you said, this rotten kind of feeling. How long did you think it took for you to complete the game?
Yeah, so I will preface with saying that I am a kind of a completionist type player. I do like finding every collectible I can.
Hmm.
Not to the point of obsession, like where I'm looking at online guides at the same time that I'm
Or turning
playing.
on high contrast mode and just
Yeah, yeah,
looking
no,
for all the.
absolutely. Um, but I do try to search every corner and crevice that I can.
Hmm.
Um, so that being said, this is a very long game, even without that type of playthrough. I ended my or that play style, excuse me. I ended my playthrough at 27 hours.
27 hours. Wow.
Yes.
So you just sat down and then you booked it through.
Oh, I went when I played The Last of Us 1 7 years ago, I beat it in one sitting, one
Hmm.
14-hour sitting. It was amazing. In this game, I knew I couldn't do that. I knew it'd be a disservice to this game
Yeah.
just because I had heard that it was long. I tried keep in mind, I tried to absolutely keep any mention of this game at all out of my
Same.
life. So I made different YouTube accounts. I used YouTube signed out just to keep the rotation and the ad like the ad recommendations kind of confused and such
Hmm.
on different devices and stuff. I really took this seriously. I stayed away from social media hellholes like Reddit and stuff where spoilers were just rampant. So all I knew was that the game was long.
To avoid spoilers, especially when the game, because it was easy to avoid the leaks for me, but
Yeah.
it's when the game released, and when when my guy, when MK Ice and Fire, and then it's Christopher Odd is, I also follow their playthroughs. When the game released, I click on the video, and it's like I wouldn't click the YouTube logo to go back to home for any of my
Hmm.
videos. Everything had to be related. Like I wouldn't even, like if I were to, I wouldn't type The Last of Us in the search bar because I knew it would, like it just, the recommendations would be, "Oh, this character death, that character death." I'm like, no.
Yeah.
And it was a whole, it took me 3 days, 3 days, dude, to me watching to finish it. And the reason I'm asking you about the length is today I was watching, or I was reading up on just the general state of AAA games pacing. Right? It was um, and we know that Naughty Dog has a history of crunch culture.
Yeah.
Right? They, I mean, you think, you look at every single beautifully, intricately detailed animation, and like, and you can't help but wonder if that came, if you can't help but know that that came at the expense of human hours and possibly health.
Right.
You know, simulation time, everything. Did you think personally that the game was too long, or was it just the right length for you?
Um, yeah, so I will say before I answer that question that I was made aware also of the crunch beforehand, and this is something that is really controversial, and I think everyone can kind of disagree with. It's not good to overwork your employees, and I do want to preface by saying that while I do love this game to a very strong degree, I really strongly disagree with the practices that I don't know if it was Neil Druckmann himself or Naughty Dog in general that they placed upon their employees. They really, it's distressing at best. Um, but I will say, for what it's worth, they created a hell of a game, and I will say that I thought the length was absolutely perfect. At no point did I think the game was too long or too short. I just thought structurally it made so much sense. Like everything in this game just makes sense to me. It just works.
Mm-hmm.
Everything just feels perfect for me. So the length
Right.
was absolutely perfect, and the pacing, which I know a lot of people have strong feelings about as well. But we
Yeah.
can
Yeah, that's, I want to get to that right after we maybe talk about the gameplay for a little bit. So
absolutely,
um gameplay wise, and when I say gameplay, I'm thinking more so like, sure, gameplay mechanics and also the world. Everything technical slash mechanical that you had to interact with. What were some of the more satisfying elements? Because for me, I
yeah.
experienced the game from a visual standpoint. Watching, but I couldn't help but notice, wow, there's a lot that has changed from The Last of Us One. You know.
Right. So The Last of Us One, I actually did play before this game. I completed it about 2 weeks before the release, just to refresh my mind, not only of the story and where we're at, but of the gameplay and what it's like. And I thought it was great. It's my favorite game of all time. Like, how could
Hmm.
it be any better? And I know a lot of people were criticizing the gameplay when it first came out, and I couldn't believe it. 14-year-old ignorant Aiden was just like, "No, I'm right. It's my favorite game. You can't say anything about it." And some of that lives on with this game too, and we could talk more about that later. But the gameplay is I could not believe I was playing the sequel to The Last of Us while I was playing the game itself, like the actual, like you said, the actual gameplay, not just the story and the dialogue,
Hmm.
but the mechanics. It is a tried and true sequel in that regard. Everything's bigger, better, more fluid, more seamless. It controls better. Everything is just better. And the things that really stood out to me were the sprawling levels. So in Last of Us 1, we don't have levels that are that big, and we don't have
Hmm.
levels that are as vertical or as dense. They're just simple combat encounters, pieces
Hmm.
of cover here, kind of reminiscent of a Call of Duty checkpoint in the campaign,
Yeah.
But they're a little more open than that because you need to sneak around to be able to, these are more. I classify the game as a genre of like it falls into the stealth action genre. It's not full on action. It's not full on stealth. It's somewhere some gray area in between. But immediately, I think you notice you don't even have to play it to know these levels are massive and they are open and they are filled with optional encounters, which is
Mhm.
something I thought was interesting. Like when you go to Seattle day one with Dina, and you're on the horseback exploring that one city block,
Yeah.
you don't have to go in a lot of those buildings. You can, and they're filled with infected and a lot of good loot, but you don't have to. So
Mhm.
it's like semi open world because there's these open
Yeah.
areas, things are optional in them, but obviously it's still a linear game and it's pushing you forward. It's similar to like Darksiders 2, Darksiders 3 in that regard.
Mhm.
But yeah, so that's immediately what stuck out to me. And it stuck out to me in Seattle day one when I was in a combat encounter. And usually, if I mess up the stealth, I'm kind of stingy about my ammo, so I will just like restart the checkpoint to
What
like if I miss a
difficulty
shot or
did
if
you play
I
it
mess
on?
up my. Oh, so I played on hard, the second to last
Okay.
difficulty, and the reason is because on Survivor, I don't know if they did in this game, but in Survivor and Last of Us One, you lose your ability to use listen mode, and I
Yeah.
integral part of the game. At least for my first playthrough, I want to be able to have listen mode. So I played on hard.
Mhm.
Uh,
Okay, yeah.
Regardless, I hit start and it said restart checkpoint or restart encounter, and it said 20 minutes. So like I had been in a single combat encounter for 20 minutes because of how big it was. It was like that
Mhm.
city block corner with the gas station and the library and the apartment complex
Yeah.
in Seattle day one. I was absolutely blown away. Another feature was the movement. You can't jump in Last of Us One. You just and your sprinting feels quite sluggish. If you get caught by an enemy,
You
you
get
have to fight
tagged.
them. You
Yeah.
cannot run. You cannot run. In Last of Us 2, you can absolutely outrun enemies, and I think that's a good thing because it allows for that cat and mouse gameplay to really be cat and
Mhm.
mouse, because in Last of Us 1, when you get caught, you're kinda just caught, and you just kinda have to hope and pray that you can find a good hiding spot to get lost in, and the enemies will lose sight of you, but in this game,
Mhm.
you can absolutely get lost, and that's due to not only your speed, but the environment and your ability to go prone and squeeze through
Right.
those little holes in the walls and such. I was just blown away. So, the level design is the main, uh, thing that really just blew me away about
It's
the
like the
gameplay.
biggest, would you say, so what you're saying is the level design was the first kind of big
Absolutely,
objective
yeah.
improvement from the first game, in your opinion?
Abs
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely, and the second one is the crafting. The
Oh
crafting
man, I
Yeah,
love the crafting was ASMR for me. I don't know if
there
it
are,
was
like
for you.
No, yeah, absolutely. There are, like, 6 recipes with 5 materials in the first game,
Mhm.
and they're pretty simple. Some of them do carry over. Molotovs carry over, upgraded melee weapons carry over, but honestly, I don't find a lot of them useful in the first one, especially the smoke bombs. They're just these random smoke bombs. In this game, they swap out the smoke bombs for stun bombs, which then can then be upgraded into smoke bombs, which I thought was a great mechanic, and I'll get on that next 'cause that's another mechanic, the upgrades. But yeah, just crafting, taking 6 materials and being able to have, I think it's like 10 or 12 items across both of our characters that they can individually craft
Mhm.
is just is such a big improvement to me. And it's because it emphasizes trade-offs. In Last of Us 1, a nail bomb has its own specific materials that are
Mhm.
different from a Molotov cocktail. However, in this game, you know, med kits, Molotovs, incendiary shells, and hunting pistol ammo all need the same materials.
Mhm.
So it's like a push and pull, and you really have to decide what's worth it,
Yeah.
at for the situation. So you might play it differently. I'm not going to say it's like two different playthroughs like Breath of the Wild, but you will play it differently than other players. I One of my good friends said that he didn't use stun bombs at all, and they were my favorite item because I love the melee in this game, which is another improvement, but that's a very minor one. So I will say the crafting is another one that got me, and spiraling off of that, the upgrades in Last of Us One, and you'll notice I keep flashing back to Last of Us One because these are just objectively amazing upgrades to the
Sure.
game, which is why no one's mad about the gameplay, right? I think Donkey said that in his video. He's like, no one is upset about the gameplay. The gameplay
Mhm.
improvement the gameplay has been so much more refined. But just the last thing I'll touch on I'd argue is pretty major is the upgrades. So using supplements to upgrade your character and parts to upgrade your weapons that carried over from Last of Us One.
Mhm.
However, supplements in Last of Us One, you could just pick and choose whatever skill you wanted, and it was only one set of skills. So you could just upgrade your health, upgrade your melee damage,
Yeah.
upgrade your listen mode distance. That's it. There were like 5 or 6 abilities. In this game, there are 4 or 5 skill trees per character with slight variations, but ultimately they focus on the same things: explosives, your base character abilities, melee, crafting, precision, explosives,
Hmm.
such like that. And you get to choose which skill trees you want to upgrade. And that, I think, adds a little bit of choice into it because there's only a limited supply of supplements and pills to find. So, you'll play a little different and you get to prioritize when you want to upgrade first,
Hmm.
which
What were
made it
some
super
of the you so going back to level design, like what were some of the more breathtaking sequences from you? Like for me, um it would, I mean, aside from the opening, right? I mean, you see just like the luscious kind of countryside, which was teased in the trailers, but for me, just the
right.
scale. So yeah, Seattle, like you're saying, it's like whoa, this whole new kind of world that you have the option of exploring or just completely bypassing. So you
Right.
could theoretically miss the music shop, right? You could theoretically
Yeah.
miss a lot of this other stuff, but for me, it was that sequence where Lev and Abby have to make it up this huge building to get to the
Mhm.
hospital. Whoa, just like the that felt like a whole bunch of games put into one, like Journey and all these other games that require you to get to a certain location. It's just like, and you see,
Mhm.
that's kind of interwoven with her as well. Just fear of heights and
Yeah.
just like, uh, yeah, for me, that's a standout. Or just like the rushing waves of the of what downtrodden Seattle has become. The fact that certain places
Yeah.
of it has become this waterfall. I just so appreciate when the game can look like concept art. You know.
Yeah, the graphics are insane. I'll say that really quick. The
Yeah.
graphics are exceptional. It's probably the best looking game I've played.
Yeah.
I will say you and I share the skyscraper. The skyscraper, definitely in the later portion of the game. I believe that, if I'm not mistaken, that's on Seattle Day 2 for Abby. Seattle Day 2, we're pretty sure.
Around because there's
Yeah,
3 days of
and,
Seattle. Or is it for Abby?
right, there's 3 days for both characters in Seattle,
Gotcha.
and we can touch on why that's important later. But, yeah, the skyscraper, something that wasn't big in Last of Us 1 was verticality. You could have wide open areas, but there wasn't any element of different floors, but when you're in this multi-level skyscraper, I believe there were 4 layers to it, and there's
Hmm.
enemies interwoven and jumping through other layers to chase you or just because that's their patrol route. I was absolutely shocked, and there's different ways to move throughout of it. I couldn't believe I was playing a Last of Us sequel. It felt like Uncharted, which is really the vibe I got from this game. It was like Last of Us. It was like Naughty Dog just had like the perfect love child between their 2 premiere series, Uncharted and Last of Us, and they just melded them into this one game, and it's incredible. Although more so for Abby, her story is a little more action packed compared to Ellie's. But I will say the first time it really got me, and I understood the scale of what I was facing, was when you're playing as Ellie and you first encounter the Seraphites or scars as they're referred to by the
And you hear
WOS,
the whistle, and then
the
like
whistle, and then
boom.
you just take an arrow to the shoulder. I was absolutely floored. And as you get through this thick vegetation and you get to this multi-level parking garage,
Hmm.
I was so floored. I was just like, "This is," no pun intended, but, I was just like, "This is insane." I was like, "This is just," it's such a good combat encounter, and it's like 15 minutes long, and it's open and sprawling, and there's so many different routes to go. Just the level design blew me away. Those had to be the 2 moments, the skyscraper and the first encounter with the scars
I
for
just like
me.
that the you get into Seattle, you get the different factions, right? And I'd imagine that in this universe, across America and across the world, humanity has reserved back to this tribalism kind of thing.
Yeah.
And the cordyceps disaster has only been in the world for what, 25 years? About
Yeah, I think it's
20
like
plus
20.
years? So it's interesting to see different games' interpretation of what humanity would look like. We had a collapse and we were suddenly trying to make our way back. So you had Horizon Zero Dawn, we had tribalism mixed in with mech culture. Whereas this
Yeah.
game, yeah, and wild concept, but with this game, they focused. I felt like the first Last of Us, in many ways, was more of what you'd consider a traditional zombie game. Would you say that?
Absolutely.
Whereas The
Absolutely.
Last of Us 2 is so much more human centric. Although the
Yeah.
zombies don't take a back seat really. I mean they're at this. What do you
Yeah,
make
Last
of
of Us
that?
Last of Us One does kind of give like Walking Dead, like traditional zombie story vibes because you're going through abandoned towns,
Hmm.
abandoned highways. When you get to Billstown, that's pretty generic zombie, stuff. What sets apart Last of Us is the dynamic between Joel and Ellie. Obviously, no zombie story really touches on that. And I'd argue that the cordyceps are very unique zombies for a zombie story as well. But that's not
Yeah.
too different. Last of Us Two, I told when I was talking with my friends initially, I was like, this feels like the setup for like a comic book universe. I read a lot of comic books.
Mm.
It feels like a comic book universe setup, and it feels like almost like the Last of Us cinematic universe. Almost like it's just in one, you have two factions, the hunters and the fireflies, the savages and the semi organized group, right? That's it. In this game, you have the WLF, you have Tommy's farm, you have the Rattlers, you have the Seraphites, you have an ongoing war in the background, turf wars between these two. And this is just Seattle. So you can only imagine what the rest of the country looks like. And I thought it was so badass.
Well, the Rattlers, correct me if I'm wrong. Are the Rattlers the faction right at the very end?
Yes, they are the ones in
Okay.
Santa Barbara.
Okay. Yeah, for me, I kind of found them more interesting than the Scars. I felt like we're maybe let's get into like pacing and execution. I feel like if they'd have found a way to mix the Scars and the Rattlers into one unifying threat, that may have been interesting to see against what Ellie and Abby have to face.
It could have been dynamic. However, I think the Rattlers are kind of geographically limited to Santa Barbara area because there's a fat distance between California and Washington, right?
Yeah.
So I mean they are West Coast, but they're so far apart.
Hmm.
Uh, and you got to think about that. But yeah, another thing that I really appreciated about this universe now is it felt so much more refined and elite and mature. So like in the first game, people are still using wood planks with nails to beat each other up. But when you get that introduction to the WLF in the first hour of the game, they're dressed in sleek, you know, black
They're
clothes
pretty much
and
the
they have
military.
gear.
They took
They have,
over Fedra, right?
right, they have tactical gear, and
Yeah.
then even more with the Rattlers at the end, they have silenced submachine guns and bulletproof armor.
Right. That was weird to see. Like
That
Ellie
was weird to
with
see at
like
the
a
very end.
silence with a MP5 or whatnot,
Sharp
whatever it
MP5.
was.
Yeah,
Yeah. That was
it felt a little
weird.
unnatural. It did feel a little unnatural, but I loved it because you got a silenced weapon with a ton of ammo, which is, I don't know if you played the last one, the previous title, but Joel at the end they give him a freaking M4
Yeah.
and ammo, and he can just drop all of these soldiers, and it feels so satisfying. Resident Evil does the same thing. They let you go all out
Hmm.
at the end of the game because they've been starving you of ammo, which is another thing this game does. But if you are willing to explore like I was, you will not really be running out of ammo that
I
much.
just thought it was I just thought it was weird. I thought it may have been a little weird the fact that Fedra, I think, was basically the military faction
Yeah. So
in
Fedra is kind
Seattle.
of like yeah.
So why then wouldn't they have automatic weapons? Or did
You
they?
know,
And I just didn't notice because they had snipers, they had all these other, but automatic weapons seem to be like a is it just a game structure thing where they wanted to leave it towards the end or?
I'm not sure because in Last of Us One, the military has fully automatic assault rifles, but you never fight the military until the very end,
Hmm.
um, or the actual like what the remains of the U.S. government. Honestly, I don't. That is kind of a plot hole in my mind, like where all the high-powered weaponry is, because the WLF they're all using like pretty old school semi-automatic rifles,
Yeah,
um,
or
and stuff like
carbines.
that.
We do kind of get
Yeah.
the backstory that that Seattle is. I mean, as we knew it in Last of Us 2, and then like in the 20 years of the Cordyceps pandemic, quote unquote, like they experienced a civil war where they bombed the ever living crap out of each
Oh,
other.
you're right. They did just lay
So
waste
I
to
don't know,
the.
but I don't know if that totally erases the fact that the military had high powered weapons, and
Mhm.
yeah, maybe they kept that away as a immersion factor. That is one of the things I was thinking about. Like where, so they had tanks, obviously, right? They had tanks, they had boats, they even
Right.
had cars. There's this one scene where Jesse and Ellie are overlooking they're looking at the was it
The bridge, I believe it is like
the
the bridge.
bridge leading up to where the aquarium area is, and you see cars on the
Easter eggs,
on the
the
bridge.
NPCs.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just like, whoa, okay, so they have all that, but where is, just automatic
Maybe
firearms or whatnot?
maybe it's because like it wasn't that serious of a threat. We're just facing basic patrols and such. We're not facing the army,
Hmm.
that we see at the end where we have those speedboats and all that military equipment and such.
Yeah.
That,
One
that is I haven't thought about.
one gameplay thing that I was gonna ask, what were some of the okay, so we know we're acutely aware that this game has a lot of objective improvements, but even so, what were some of the more annoying or overlooked elements in your opinion? Because I hear one of the criticisms is that you have to. I think this was a thing in the old game too, but for whatever reason, people are pointing it out more with this game. It's the fact that you have to open so many filing cabinets and
Yeah.
different things. What do you say to that?
So I will say that you kind of have the option to not do that, but I think that would be unfair to players that want to have a lot of ammo like I did. It
Hmm.
it doesn't bother me just because that's my play style, but I can understand how it would bother someone. Naughty Dog or have incorporated a lot of different accessibility features into this game that allow you to kind of bypass that. Like they added a ping into this game where it's kind of like sonar, and all the items in your radius will blip, so you
Hmm.
just know where they are. It's also dependent on your difficulty. So as you get harder difficulties, resources will be more scarce. Because I was playing on hard, and I was like, man, half the cabinets I'm opening don't have anything in
Don't
them.
have
So
anything,
it was a
yeah.
little frustrating. I will say that didn't bother me as much as, and this is a complaint from the original game. It did not bother me as much as stealth kills taking a pretty long time.
Yeah.
Um, it gets a little obnoxious, but I think the game kind of gives you a middle finger. But one of the abilities for both Ellie and Abby is that stealth kills are shortened dramatically in the stealth trees for both of them. So I got those immediately,
Wait, are you
just because.
saying that in the first game, stealth kills took way longer as opposed to this
So
game? Or
no, so a complaint about the first game, in addition to looting the cabinets and stuff, is that Joel's strangling animation was way too long.
right.
But I disagree. I think it was really immersive to see the enemy like claw at your face and see Joel's, the veins popping out of his neck and
Hmm.
such. Because there's a lot of detail there. I'm not saying detail sells the game. That's kind of my problem with some Rockstar games like Red Dead 2. It's like, oh, the horse poops, then that
Yeah.
kind of sells the game. But there's a lot of little nitty gritty details in Last of Us 2 that make it shine, I think. And I guess going back to the looting, it doesn't really ruin the game for me because it's not a big feature. A lot of these items are actually out in the open. They're
Hmm.
on top of things, but there are some stuff that it's a little obnoxious to get to. However, I will say I think that's part of the immersion, and this is kind of a gray area. If you're a person that values immersion, values realism, you
Hmm.
have no problem. If you're
No.
someone like me, where I really don't care about immersion and realism, it can
Hmm.
be annoying. But it really, in terms of Last of Us 2, and it's about a game about perspective and setting you in a universe and letting you know what universe you're in. I
Yeah.
had no problem with it because it really just let me know, a scavenger and stuff like that. But
Yeah,
I can,
which is
I can.
why I'm surprised that you finished the game at the length that you did. Like for me, I would 27 hours would not be enough for me. Well, maybe it would be. Like just if you're playing the game nonstop for that long and you're exploring every nook and cranny, and 27 hours is a long time to finish a game, right? For
Oh yeah,
because games used to be like you could beat Half-Life 2 what, 4 hours or 8 hours. I mean, you're
yeah,
not speedrunning or anything. You could be yeah, those games used to be 8 hours, and now we're fast forward to now. It's like at least a 25 hour GTA or Red Dead. Which is why I was surprised that you finished the game in such an amount of time. But what I will say is, I did. You and I had a parallel where you played The Last of Us 1 2 weeks before. I went back and rewatched the. Somebody played the remaster,
hmm
on survival difficulty, and that it is true. Like you can't. The listening is completely out on the survival difficulty
yeah,
in Last of Us. One thing I think maybe the first game might have done better, and maybe it's due to the fact that Ellie is smaller and has the ability to be more elusive. I felt like the NPCs that you played with, whether it was Dina or more so Dina than Jesse, um, which I gotta preface, I like the way that the NPCs, I like the characteristics that they have, not NPCs, characters. So like Dina will wait for you to initiate the action before like killing someone. So if you sneak up on
yeah,
someone, she will take out the other person. Whereas Jesse, he'll just go ramble in, and you got to go for it.
I'll go right for it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and it
absolutely.
kind
I
of
did notice
shows to
that.
how combatively available, able those guys are. But I felt like in terms of them following you around and being out in the open, I felt like Ellie did a better job of hiding in the first game. Whereas this game, like it, there were parts where I watched it kind of took me out of the moment to see Dina clearly out in the open and in the line of sight of the enemy. But then the enemy will only
Yeah,
see her if they see you. So how did you feel about
right.
that?
So it's kind of like a pick your own poison issue. I
Mm-hmm.
had the same exact issue in the first game, and I will say I kind of disagree with you. In the first game, I replayed it this time, and I was like, I cannot believe how annoying Ellie is being right now because the AI is a little tricky in that game. Like,
Yeah.
especially when you have two NPCs, like, or even three with Henry, Sam, and Ellie, or
Mm-hmm.
with Tess and Ellie, or David and his little guy friend that he brings. It just gets ridiculous, especially because their audio is so clear of where they're stepping, and they're just shuffling around a clicker, and the clicker doesn't notice them.
Mm. Yeah.
But in this game, I rarely ever noticed Dina or Jesse or Lev or Yara getting in my way, and I think Naughty Dog took a lot of steps to make sure that doesn't happen. Although I did notice it a couple times, where like Dina kind of shuffles around the corner of a table, and I know that if I did that, the enemy would see me, but
Yeah.
they didn't. Dina, it's a pick your own poison. Would you rather get that ruined for you because it breaks the immersion, or would you rather have the game be absolutely ruined for you and have
Have
you also
them
babysit
notice
your
your
NPC?
companion. Yeah.
Yeah, I would not want that at
Yeah,
all.
I
So
wouldn't want that either. See, that's a different. That's why I wanted to ask, because yeah, man, this is one of those games that I'm pissed at myself for not having a console. Like
oh
it's
yeah,
just
it's
it.
starting to work.
I'm actually. It actually might be working on me in the sense that it's making me actually want to save up for a PS5 and play the remaster when it comes out. Just to see
Yeah,
how
they're
much it
definitely gonna
changes.
do that. They did it for Last of Us One. They'll
Yeah.
definitely do it for this one.
Yeah, so yeah, that was just I think of all the things, maybe from a visual standpoint, and I think it depends on your play style, right? Like if you're an aggressive play style, the NPC is not or your companion isn't gonna be that much of an issue for you. But if you play this like a Metal Gear Solid thing where you're really stealth, your target is stealth. Um, I guess for the person that I was watching, he was both a combination of stealth and Rambo. He
Mhm.
could his MO was to take everyone out. And what you were mentioning earlier about the variety of playstyles, right? You have the option to run, and it feels like a chase scene when you do run, as
Oh
opposed
yeah.
to the game forcing you to get into combative situations every single time. You could do you think it's possible to play the game uh in total stealth? Like could you sneak your way to say Nora in that hospital, or could you sneak your way to like could you really sneak your way around the scars when you're going to
Yeah.
that house?
So I will say in The Last of Us One, absolutely. There are so many encounters that you can just sneak through, more
Mm-hmm.
so with infected than humans. Um, and
Right.
I know for this game that's the same. I've definitely heard from other people that you can totally non-lethal encounters. I don't know which ones. Like the hospital with Nora is a little shady for me, but I know you can still do it. But this game definitely does put you in situations where you have to use violence in combat.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but like I said, I don't think it clarified. My playstyle was kind of half and half, like the playthrough you were watching. I basically would try to stealth as many enemies as I could before I inevitably messed up and got caught, and then I would,
You'd have to kill, yeah.
take out the shotgun, take out the revolver, take out the stun bombs, and just go to work. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
which I think is kind of the best way to play the game, kind of half and half. But I know some people that played super aggro, and I know some people that played super stealth. So there's definitely
Mm-hmm.
different ways to play it. I think there are some specific encounters, more so with infected than humans, because infected are a little easier to sneak by than humans.
Yeah.
Uh, but yeah,
Well, the
I
game,
think
yeah,
it's
the game
definitely
still
possible.
encouraged it. It's like any other game. Completely taking out your opponent is going to be a lot easier than putting them to sleep. Like
Oh yeah,
with Deus Ex, I remember like the first time I played through that, I was a complete pacifist. I wanted to be, I wanted to be just like, oh, only kill when it's absolutely necessary. Whereas this game, I
right,
feel like a lot of people, and we're now getting into the kind of pacing slash execution of, say, characters and their actions or whatnot. I feel like if Joel was this brute force that, he confronts everything, I felt like Ellie maybe I expected I'll say I expected Ellie to be um more elusive. But it seemed like in this game they just gave you they sort of made Ellie into this, you know, I don't want to say Joel clone, but when he died, it's like she took on his persona and on taking
in
things.
combat.
Yeah. So what would you say
Yeah.
to that?
In response to that, I will say that obviously because she's a more nimble looking, she's a female character and she has a stiletto switchblade instead of like her bare fists or a machete like Joel or a shiv.
Mm-hmm.
Um, she does give off more of like a nimble, elusive persona. I understand that, but you can definitely play her as that. You can absolutely play her as that. You can use your stiletto in the first game. However, this is what I'm going back to. You get to play as Ellie once in the base game, and
Right.
then the entire DLC you play as Ellie.
Right.
She is brutal. She is absolutely brutal, and because she's tiny, you don't get the full scale of her savagery.
Mm-hmm.
But even when she's tiny, she's jumping on dudes' backs because she's so light, and she is stabbing them to death all the way to the ground.
Yeah.
She her way around her
So
handgun and
she's
her
like a Shiv
rifle.
master and just like
Yeah,
she embodied stealth in that first game where you could play stealth with Joel, but it's like you have this power. You can bash a dude's head in with like a pipe. Why
yeah.
wouldn't
That's
you, you
why
know?
that's why I loved Abby so much, and we can get to that too because
Yeah.
you do play as two characters in this game. Spoiler, not really. I think everyone kind of knows that. And
Yeah.
Abby is an absolute beast. She has those gigantic Popeye arms, and she can. One, I think a noticeable difference is she doesn't have Ellie's knife. Ellie's knife allows you to kill clickers and
Yeah.
counter infected grab you,
Yeah.
and
Abby
insta stealth.
just grabs the neck
Abby
and pops it off or
has
just like suffocates
people
you.
and she can't execute clickers and stuff like that. She has to craft her own knives or shivs with blade and
Mm.
binding and such. And that's what Joel had to do too. Um, and then also Abby has a skill tree dedicated to a special character ability, which I did not expect to see in The Last of Us of all games, called Momentum in her melee tree, where
Oh.
if she gets a one hit kill off of someone, say off of a stagger, like hitting them with a bottle, a brick, or a
Mm-hmm.
stun bomb, that it starts a timer, and during that timer, if she only one shots people with melee, or
Mm.
what's called a strike in this game. So it's called momentum because if you can keep meleeing enemies, you're just an absolute machine. And it really helped me out in this one section where you're with Yara and Lev after you help them escape, and they have to open the door for you in that one basement of the demolished building with all the infected.
Mm-hmm.
And while on the other side you have to defend, I had a machete or like a pipe or something, and I just kept beating the crap out of these zombies, just one-shotting them left and right. And it was so good. So that, Abby, I think, is designed to be a little more brute force. Her weapons are certainly more brute force. She
Yeah.
has a double barrel.
Crossbow.
She has a crossbow as opposed to a bow, which is a little more, it's less elegant than the bow, I'd argue.
Mm-hmm.
And she has incendiary shells with the shotgun. She has a semi-auto rifle with way more ammo than Ellie could ever dream of having, and she has a pistol that just one shots everything. She's way more brutal, and her campaign is certainly less straightforward than Ellie's, and it's certainly more action packed. In Ellie, you're just going through WLF territory, through Seraphite territory, these kind of more linear encounters. With Abby, you're going to skyscrapers. You literally go to ground zero of the infection in Seattle, and you fight the source of the infection, that gigantic, what they call the Rat King zombie boss,
Mm-hmm.
with that undying part of it that rips itself off the body.
Yeah.
You don't get that with Ellie, and I think that's for a specific reason. Abby's absolutely supposed to be more action packed, more complex, more enthralling, and more adrenaline pumped, which I absolutely adored because while you still have to kind of preserve your ammo, like Ellie, you get so much more, and
Mm-hmm.
you face so much more. You have what I would argue is the best encounter in the entire game with Abby, and that's when you're on Haven, the Seraphite headquarter island, and you're fighting through
Both.
war, and both WLF
Yeah.
and are fighting each other, and then they notice you, and then everyone's fighting you, but they're fighting each other. It's phenomenal.
That was a very heartbreaking kind of at that point because I don't know about you, but watching the experience, right? Just watching this conflict unfold. It's just, I mean, the whole game you can say that is very emotionally fatiguing. But at that point, it's just like, wow,
Yeah, I
what have
think
we
that's
come
really
to?
the
Yeah.
game really shows its themes, and I won't say it wears its themes on its sleeves, because obviously a lot of people I think miss the point of this game, and I think we're starting to close in on the story and such as we move on from the gameplay, but we
Yeah,
can
I have
your
so
opinion.
much more. Well, to get onto that, let's get to it. So
Yeah.
pacing, right? Did the pacing of the game work for you? Because if a lot of the criticism, which I feel somewhat, a lot of it, if I'm being honest, is somewhat warranted. You know, execution of scenes and how they are sequenced. So everything from flashbacks, being inside flashbacks, you know, plot reveals versus implications. Um,
Right.
did the pacing of the game work for you?
I will say I agree with you. The criticism is certainly warranted because this game really breaks a lot of rules of structure.
Hmm.
Um, Gameplay wise, before we even get in touch with the story, gameplay wise, you fully upgrade Ellie and you feel so accomplished, and then you switch to Abby, who starts at square one. So
Yeah.
it throws off the game a little bit, where it's like, oh, now I'm back to having one long gun and one small gun, my
Hmm.
pistol and my rifle. And I don't even have a knife. I don't even have pills to upgrade. I don't have parts to upgrade my weapons. I don't have crafting recipes yet. I haven't even found all my crafting recipes. So it feels like you start back from square one.
Yeah.
I understood that. That kind of frustrated me at first, but then I realized what they were doing, and that's when I was like, okay, I buy this. But in terms of story, when the first flashback sequence occurs, where you're with Joel at the museum, I was like, oh, this is really
Oh,
nice. I
that
don't,
I was so
yeah,
broken by that. That was so
yeah,
to me that was beautiful because I think watching it, it's like it felt like a break. Whereas gaming for you, I'm sure like you have to actually move the joystick to. Like, but yeah, what were you
yeah.
saying about?
It, first off, I like to say the Jurassic Park reference was incredible. It's like the sequel wasn't as good. I thought it was fantastic.
Mm,
But I didn't, more so than I enjoyed it, I was like, why is this here? Like, why did they decide to insert this flashback?
yeah.
I did notice that. But then after there's more flashbacks with Ellie and then more flashbacks with Abby, I started to catch on that these flashbacks were placed there for very specific reasons. And that's because they're at the same point in each other's stories. And those points are significant events.
Hmm.
Um, I can't recount all of them, but after Ellie or Abby gets knocked out, or after a big reveal happens with Owen, or a big reveal happens with Dina, goes to this flashback where I think it's trying to show you that times were more simple and times were good before. And this is where I say again, they try to hammer the themes a little bit. Things were good before revenge took center stage.
Yeah.
Um, and the closer we get to revenge, the more hectic it gets. And that's kind of the message of the game, and we can talk about that later when we start focusing on the story. But
No, yeah.
that is pacing, and yeah, the flashback at first was like and the switch to Abby at first was like oof, but as the game started to, the game, I felt like the game was telling me, Aiden, like you gotta trust me, man. You just gotta trust me right now. Like this is gonna work, and I'm just like okay, I'm pretty open minded when it comes to these things, and it just worked for me in the end. I
Which is
think it
why,
it
yeah.
it
No,
worked.
I get it. Which is why I think it's understandable that for some people it might not work for, because
No,
there's
yeah,
the elephant in the room. If it isn't already stated, obviously clear on this in the time that we've been talking, every when it cuts to Abby in the middle of the game, what you have in the back of your mind is the last image you had of her, which is her bashing Joel's head in. You know, so
right.
and that's like that. I think we're talking about why this game has had the emotion, had the reaction that it has, is that a lot of people reacted, understandably so, I think, very poorly to first of all, Joe's death, right? So let's
Right.
just go ahead and let me ask you right off the bat. In your honest opinion, was Joel's death handled correctly? And would you, if you were Neo or you were the developers, if you were Naughty Dog, would you, and this kind of ties into pacing and sequencing as well, would you have handled that differently? Would you have paced that differently?
So I thought about it in my head. Well, first when it happened, just did not expect it at all.
Mm-hmm.
Did not expect it at all. As soon I saw it coming as the scene got set up, but I didn't expect to see that so early in the game. Uh, I think they handled it perfectly. I think
Mm.
there's a reason that it is so brutal, right? Like a lot of the reason that people are upset is because he doesn't die pretty. He gets destroyed by Abby,
Yep.
who we don't know yet, obviously. And I thought to myself, I was like, if they were going to kill Joel, when should they have done it? After completing the entire game.
Yeah.
And I thought, if this was the story they wanted to tell of Abby and Ellie, not of Joel, and even more than Abby and Ellie, of violence and hatred, they have to use Joel as the catalyst to kick this whole thing off. So I agree with it completely. I thought it was handled very well. There's one thing that drives me absolutely insane, and a lot of people are with me on this. Manny,
Yeah.
the
I knew you were gonna
Mexican
talk. I knew we were gonna get to
I will
that.
preface to anyone listening, I am half Mexican, half Puerto Rican, fully Latino, very passionate about my heritage. Manny drove me insane. And when he spits on Joel, I was like, okay, fine. And then he says in the most like enhanced Mexican accent, he goes, "Burn in hell, pendejo." I was just like, what the fuck? I was just like, what's going on? It
Yeah.
kind of it almost ruined it for me because it's such a shocking moment. So I would probably remove that. But yeah, if I were Druckmann and if I were this dev team, I don't think I would be capable of even thinking of killing off Joel. You know, a lot of people wanted just another Joel and Ellie story. Joel and Ellie take revenge on Abby for killing Dina or for killing Tommy or something. And you know, that could have worked. That certainly could have worked. The problem is that it's so much less risky than what they did. And for me, the risk absolutely paid off. For some, it totally didn't. And Druckmann knew that because I think he said it in a tweet before or in an interview. He's like, this is going to be divisive. But
Mm-hmm.
it's that same Last Jedi logic. And
You either love it or
how
you
I,
hate it. You know.
yeah, how I feel about Last Jedi is not relevant. But Ryan Jones, or Ryan Jones, however you say his name,
Ryan Johnson. Yeah.
Ryan Johnson, excuse me, said, you know, when you know what's good for a story, you want to take the risk. And then Mark Hamill says, well, no, you want to please the fans. That's essentially this game. However, I think the risk that they took is much greater than The Last Jedi's risk, and it pays off indefinitely more.
Yeah. You could
So
definitely say that.
the decision for me absolutely works. And I kind of understand why it wouldn't if you haven't completed the game. I think once you complete the game, you kind of have to realize like, oh shit, like I see what they're going for. I think Donkey says it in his video, you know, it's like, yeah, duh. Like everyone's like, it's a bold move. Why would they do it? It's like, have you played the game? Like,
Yeah.
and you know, not knowing why it happened, I think is genius because then when you reveal, and this is kind of the key moment, I would argue, all of this boils down to when you play as Abby in her first flashback and you find out that Joel brutalized her father in the first game. If you empathize with her, the game has done its job. If you don't, then the game's just not going to work for you.
Yeah. And that's you hit it right on the nail. Like just the fact that um empathy, right? I mean, forgiveness
Right.
being. I think forgiveness is like I think the bigger theme. People say this is a revenge story, and that's the premise, right?
Right.
Abby or Ellie both trying to extract their revenge. I think, but this is a really interesting kind of psychological study on the nature of gaming in general. I feel
Yeah.
like it opens the doors to a lot of interesting conversations about human nature, which I can't remember the last game to do this really did. Which is why I
Yeah.
think it's worth talking in a talking in an open manner about just the reaction to Joel's death. I think and because it's unavoidable for the most part in that it ties into your feeling as you're playing Abby. Because I see a lot of
Right.
people, they get some real gratification of making her kill herself.
Oh
You
yeah,
know,
they send her off cliffs. They let her get ripped
I
apart by the
saw
shooters.
the playthrough that I was watching. I don't know if he did it on purpose, but it's like Ellie shot. Oh, man, before I get into that, if and when a remaster is made, right? Because it's coming. It might.
Right.
Do you think they will attempt to change things around a little bit? And if they did that, or if do you think they'll attempt to change things or keep in the real nature of the original game? And if they did that, would it hurt the legitimacy of the original? And before I let you go, I think what they have currently, the sequence, the in terms of actual events, because I'm not one of those people that's calling for it to be completely remade. And that's just unreasonable. 7 years of
Right.
work, they're not gonna go back and change animations, recast, re-speak dialogue. But I feel like what they have, the events that they have, makes sense to me. But um, I think it'd be interesting to see them toy around slightly with how events are structured. So um one of the things that I kind of thought about was, do you feel like Abby's portion at the very beginning could have been better presented or omitted entirely? Or do you think it was good as it is?
Um, I think it was good as it is because one, in the beginning, you start off at the WLF base, and the parallels start hitting you right then and there because it's the same opening with Ellie when she's walking through the town through Jackson. Right?
Mm-hmm.
There's kids at school, there's people working out, there's people dancing. There's merchants now. There's an economy now. There's I believe in I think it's both the clothing store in both Jackson and the stadium for the WLF. There's community, there's happiness, and that just works so much for the themes, and it works so much for me because I begin to unravel Abby and her friends and her role in this community as a character. And
Mm-hmm.
and I still hated her. I was like, "Oh my god, Abby." I was just like, this freaking
Right.
evil woman. And it really starts clicking for you. And I will say, uh then when you leave the WLF base, immediately Scar ambush, Scar attack, because it lets you know this world's not pretty, and the WLF are bigger than Jackson,
Mm-hmm.
and that means their threats are going to be equally bigger than what Jackson has to face. And you have to get some type of introduction to Mel and to Manny, because that makes Manny's death a little more hurtful, and it makes Abby's betrayal of Mel hurt even more.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes you even more disappointed in Ellie for killing Owen and Mel.
Wait, Abby's betrayal of Mel or Mel's betrayal of Abby?
Or Abby's betrayal of Mel because Abby has sex with Owen,
Oh, right, right. Yeah,
right, as all the memes, and that's obviously Mel's husband. So
yeah.
and Mel knows it's complete betrayal because Abby knew that Owen was with Mel. So it makes it more hurtful, and it makes it even more hurtful that that was the last thing on her mind before she was killed by Ellie. There was no forgiveness there. Um,
Yeah, I sort of interpreted that a little differently. I don't know. Okay, this is where I have to preface. I think I'm really dumb, man, because like I looked at that, I looked at Abby, and I flat out thought that was a trans character.
yeah,
I
so
thought
I
that's where
had
the controversy was from. Like, oh, and she's trans, and
so
but her voice acting, she sounds nothing like what. Okay, no, not saying all trans sound the same, but like, dude, that's a woman voicing her. You know,
right. And it's mainly because the leaks said that there was a trans character, and they were correct. There is a trans character
they
in the
were
game.
correct. Yeah.
But they said the trans character was named Abby, and she beats Joel to death with a golf club. And then when we see Abby as this just absurdly buff
You
woman,
buy it. I
you
bought it.
have to go, oh,
You know.
she might be the trans character. So I actually bought it too. I texted my friends, I was like, yo, I think Abby's trans. Not that I would have issue with it, but I was like, I think, you know, that might be a little forced. But then, I can't not say that once it was revealed that she wasn't trans, that I was like relieved almost, but I was just kind of glad for the story and because I really don't think Naughty Dog beats your head with its politics at all during this
No,
game.
not at
It never,
all. Not in my
never.
opinion. No.
It, no, a lot of people are like, "Oh, Naughty Dog's so woke. I'm boycotting this game." I'm like, if you might be surprised at how not injected they are into this game. I think they're used in meaningful ways,
Yeah.
personally, despite how you feel about all this type of stuff. And obviously, we don't need to talk about that right now. But I think they're used in meaningful ways.
No,
So
that's
yeah, I
fine.
did genuinely think that Abby was the trans character that I had heard so much about.
Yeah.
So I didn't read the leaks before the game, but I knew there was a trans character. That's
For
another thing they
me,
got.
it sort of changed the way I saw Abby because I didn't read into the leaks, right? So Abby, I just interpreted, oh, they're really fine. She's transgender. But everything about the way she moved and talked and and even her running animation is still somewhat feminine. Not okay, shoot. But like I just didn't buy that this was a transgender character. I
Right.
didn't. And it turns out she wasn't. This is just some girl that has And to me it changes a little bit for me in the sense that this girl harbors so much bitterness. Harbors understandably so. I mean, you see your dad get
Right.
killed by this unknown face. And like that then pushes her to want to train you because it was hinted at in her cutscenes with Owen, just like, no, we have training. I can't miss training.
Right.
This girl has worked her body to a point where she wants she wants this one thing so badly. She's willing to completely change the physical nature of her body, you know? Which is why
Absolutely.
her fights, I know we're jumping around a little bit here, but like her versus Ellie in a one-on-one match, who's going to win, man? It's Abby.
Yeah, her.
You know,
Yeah.
even Abby versus Joe. I don't know if Joe is going to win. Joe's old.
I don't even.
This dude, this Abby girl is the lead. As we know, she has a reputation with the WLF. You know, she has a
As like a top
reputation
player.
as the top scar killer. You know,
Yeah.
not that I agree completely with how her, because it's like you said. Even when you do play her, even when you do get why you're playing her, you still hate her.
Oh yeah.
You
At
never
first.
stop. I never stopped like feeling bad for her. And you could argue she arguably gets the worst end of the stick, in my opinion. Like the game, I feel like a lot of the massive hatred I see is the fact that people think that the game manipulates you or attempts to manipulate you into um into thinking that Abby is the real hero here. No one really is the real hero,
Yeah, I think that's the
you
point.
know?
No one. I think if you really wanted to get technical in terms of narrative structure, Abby technically is the hero, and I think Naughty Dog has kind of stated that before, but that's not the point. I think the point is that both of them, like I said, you're jumping around, but it doesn't really matter. Both of them strip each other's lives of everything that they
Yeah.
love, and they
Yeah.
almost do it completely at the end. But there's obviously one act of selflessness displayed at the end that we'll get to that prevents that from happening. But
Yeah.
yeah, you have to empathize with Abby at one point. If you don't empathize with her, like I I think, I found it so ironic because the people that are like, "You should kill Abby. Oh my god, I can't wait to see you, drown her, stab her to death. She should die." You know,
Mm-hmm.
this is the game for you. Like this game was made for you. Because that type of ideology is not
Yeah.
good. And this game highlights. And then a lot of people are saying, "Oh, revenge is bad. I don't need a game to tell me that." But they're the same people that say, "I want Abby to die." It's like you're kind of a little backwards there, man.
Yeah. Well,
You know,
imagine
the,
if the first game had been about Abby and her father. You know,
right.
imagine for a second that you play as basically the doctor trying to save the world. This guy who's able and supposedly, I mean, science aside, right? You can't reverse engineer a fungal disease in the brain, but it's like, okay, you have this ability, and you go throughout the game surviving and going at extreme lengths to survive. You have Abby along your side. You form a good relationship with her. Stuff happens at the very end of the game. This dude comes in with supposedly an immune girl, right? And
Mhm.
then at the end of the game, he kills you. And that's it. That's the ending you're stuck with, you know?
Yeah.
And so you would think, oh, The Last of Us 2, Abby's gonna take revenge on this dude. But no, what ends up happening is then you're switched to this perspective where you have to play as Joel and Ellie. What? The
Yeah.
characters that killed the people that might have saved the world. What? You
Right,
know?
and that you loved, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, totally, and I think that you've just so eloquently highlighted another point of this game, and that's perspective.
Mm-hmm.
The only reason that people root for Ellie and get so mad that she doesn't kill Abby is because you had a game with her beforehand. But if you
Correct.
started off, from this game, and if you just start off right at Joel's death being the catalyst, none of them are really in the right in what they do until the very end. And that's really powerful, I think. And a lot of people are reducing it, I think, very unfairly to its as basic of a message of violence is bad or revenge is bad. But you can kind of do that with any work, which is why I disregard those arguments completely. The game's message, it might be a little more on the simple end, but it's executed so well. And
Mhm.
You know, we haven't really had this in a game before, and I think it's genius.
Yeah, I
I think
can't
it's
like reiterating what I said, what we've been saying. It's like I can't remember game really where it asks you to, it makes you disagree with yourself in
yeah.
in-depth ways that I haven't seen before. But going maybe back to Abby's portion, did you? I sort of felt like um, her section was a little long. Like, I know Ellie's section was supposed to be long anyway because that's who we come in expecting to play as, right? But do you feel like Abby's portion could have been trimmed and a little
Yeah.
more airtight?
So yeah, so correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe they're of equal length in terms of chapters. They might not be of equal length in terms of time dedicated to those chapters, but if you divide the game into like levels, which it really doesn't,
Sure.
they have equal portions. But
Mm-hmm.
obviously, I think Abby's is a little bit longer
Mm-hmm.
because of the whole Scar plot. And I addressed this earlier. You know, Ellie's plot is much more straightforward than Abby's. It's just
Correct.
getting to Abby
Just
through
couldn't
her
get into
friend.
Abby. Yeah.
And you know, Abby's, a lot of people have been criticizing Abby's, are like, "There's no goal, there's no point, you're just wandering." I disagree. But, you know, it's very hectic. You start out by just trying to find Owen, and then you find scars, and then these scars help you escape, and then you have to help these scars get back to that, and then you're caught between a war between the faction you once swore allegiance to, and you know, it's a lot. I'll say that, it's so much, but it's my favorite portion of the game, so I don't think it could have been trimmed. I will say a lot of people have been criticizing, and a couple people close to me have been criticizing the amount of combat encounters in this game. Um,
It does seem
yeah,
kind of excessive, a little bit,
there
in
might there might be, you know, 2 or 3 that you could just get rid of entirely, but, I love the combat so much in this game, and once again, you know, it's a video game. You have to play a portion of it.
Mhm.
You know, it just works for me. I didn't find the combat too egregiously, drawn out in this game, or the amount of encounters. Thought it worked very well. So, yeah, I probably wouldn't trim Abby's portion just because I also don't have a game right in front of me, and I it's been a week. It's been close to a week
Yeah.
since I beat it because I beat it on Saturday.
Mhm.
So, you know, I don't have the best memory of it, but I really enjoyed my time as Abby. And I will say I enjoyed the gameplay of Abby more than Ellie actually, which might be a hot take, but I really enjoyed playing as Abby. Like my favorite
I
part of
don't think that's too invalid because I don't think that's off at all. Because Abby is, I mean, if we're just talking facts here, Abby's a little more traditional in terms of like the game archetype. You know, she's more powerful, which is why I think, um, for me, objectively, I feel with Abby's portion, there's one, if I had to eliminate, and for me, I felt it was too long. Me personally, the entire time while watching the Abby portion, for me, I always had in the back of my mind, well, I've been rooting for Ellie this whole time. Which goes back to what the game is trying to make you do, right? But for me, it's just like I became so attached to Ellie and just like her and Dina for that matter, just like her. Um and in a lot of ways I feel like the game may have been, in my personal opinion, maybe a little more, it might have been stronger if it was more Ellie, less Abby. But when Abby comes in, it's very poignant, very airtight. Like one section in um Abby's gameplay that I feel could have been handled differently is the whole Yara and Lev thing, which I feel, first of all, those characters are actually pretty good, all things
Oh yeah,
considered,
Yara and
right?
Lev are great.
Like they for Lev to be the only transgender, I don't think I've heard anybody that has a problem with them, really.
No, absolutely not, because they handle it so well.
Yeah, but I feel
Like,
like, sorry, I'll keep this short. I
yeah, it's
feel
like,
like Lev's, if they'd have, as much as I was okay with Yara's character, if they'd have killed her, because the game kind of, where it felt long was the fact that we do all this to get her medicine, right? We get have that amazing skyscraper sequence,
mhm,
um, and whatnot, but then the game just kills her off. So in my opinion, that's like, wow, that kind of, in that amount of time, we could have had a situation where another character was injured, like say Owen was injured or
mhm,
whatnot, and where, shoot, we got to go get, you know, Ellie. No, no, I'm sorry, Abby came within an inch of death, but because of this one, um because of Lev, she lives. But at that point they could have the scars. They could have executed Yara in a certain way, you know.
Yeah,
And at that point, and that whole I don't really know how to phrase it, but yeah, like the whole Yara getting medicine for her and then having her get shot, even though she takes down Isaac. Well, I
right.
feel of all characters, I wanted to see a lot, maybe not a lot more, but just a bit more of Isaac, because
I
he
did.
felt like in this game of somewhat um well handled characters and characters who have influence, I felt like he was given the least amount of spotlight when he should have been maybe a little more. He should
Yeah,
have been given a little more, in my opinion.
I felt very similarly. I wanted more Isaac, not only because he's Jeffrey Wright, who is a great actor, but
Right.
he's very intense, and he's the leader
Hmm.
of the WLF. But then when I realized that we weren't ever gonna meet the leader of the Seraphites, the Prophet, the Mother,
Yeah.
then I was okay with it because I guess they're not that important. And I guess to I'm playing a little devil's advocate. I do feel a little similarly. I'm like, oh, like Yara just kind of dies, but her getting the medicine does allow for her to save your guys' ass when confronted with Isaac, right?
Right.
However, I do kind
Well,
of agree with you that maybe there could have been something else there. But then again, you could argue that getting Owen medicine is also pointless because Ellie just destroys him either way. So they had to use some type of plot device to get Abby and Lev to bond back in Seattle. And I think Yara's injury was a good mechanism for that. I didn't really have a strong
I
problem with that.
initially thought the bond between them, and this is where my stupidity comes into play. I thought the bond between them was because again, I thought Abby was trans.
Oh,
I
I
I, I didn't
yeah.
realize Aiden. I did not realize it until after the game, and the whole time I'm thinking, you know what, this would be great. This this kind of would be better if it was just like a normal girl. Or nah, if it was a girl extracting her revenge who would just like manage to get so buff because of like years of dedication. And Lord behold, that was true the entire time. So maybe don't take my opinion too to the nail on that one. It's just like yeah, that was in Abby's portion. I think there could have maybe been a better way to, because with a story like this, I always look at how do we make it airtight and how do we make the conflict slash urgency of the story feel more central.
Mhm.
And I felt like Ellie's portion was pretty linear, but that's for a purpose. Did you have I maybe there's this one criticism I hear, or several, is that right after Joel's head gets bashed in, what are you doing with Dina? You're just going around Seattle looking at cabinets and exploring Seattle. And that it's a lengthy section that some people think is a detractor from the pace, you know?
I would also disagree there because I think they give you ample enough time to mourn Joel.
Which is good. And
Um,
I'm not saying it's imperfect, but it's what I
yeah, yeah.
hear is a criticism.
And you have to realize that you're journeying from Wyoming to Washington.
Takes a while.
That is a giant journey, and that's weeks, if not months. I believe it takes months for Ellie to get from the farm by Jackson to Santa Barbara. And if it takes you 3 days to get through Seattle, imagine how many days it
Right.
takes you to get from you know central southwestern United States all the way
Hmm.
up to the northwestern United States.
Hmm.
And I think that's ample time more, especially when you have a companion like Dina, who's really helpful, really useful. And it also, what I think is, it gives a lot of time for the effects of Dina's pregnancy to start developing when she starts to become a hindrance toward the end of day one, the beginning of day two. Right.
Credits
So
to
you
her
need.
though.
Hmm?
I feel like credits to her because she yeah, it was. Do you think that was choreographed ahead of time? Like, did you see that particular thing coming, her pregnancy, or was it like a
Hell,
was it handled right in your opinion?
I did not see her becoming pregnant at
Okay.
all. And I think it's great that it's Jesse's child
Yeah.
because one, it allows for Dina and Ellie to live a life on the farm with a child, right? Because obviously, they're both women, they can't procreate. And it also allows for some part of Jesse to live on past him
Yeah.
because Jesse's a great character. I liked him a lot. He's a solid man, and unfortunately, he meets his end at the hands of Abby. So I thought the pregnancy was handled well. And then when people are like, "Oh, Mel is pregnant," there's so many pregnant characters. It's not just because being pregnant, it's kind of an easy way to make people sympathize with the character.
I
It's
love that you
because,
mentioned that.
yeah, they the stories parallel each other, right?
Hmm.
And this is when the game started giving me massive amounts of anxiety.
Oh
Ellie
yeah.
is Mel, who is pregnant, right? So she's ended her chances of the child living as well. So
Hmm.
Owen's lineage, and
Yep.
this is where Abby's selfless act comes into play because as you're playing as Abby and you're headed toward the theater, I was having massive anxiety and I was going, "Oh my god, they're foils, they're parallel stories. Both are gonna have a dead pregnant woman. Holy shit, Abby's going to kill Dina." And I was so
And she would
worried.
have. She probably was
And
going
she
to, if not
would
for
have.
probably Lev or whatnot. Yeah.
For love, and that's really important, I think, too. Yeah, it's not just to get you to it's not a cheap way of getting you to empathize with the character. If anything, I think it's more risky, but it just works so well
Yeah.
because then it sets up not only Ellie having a good life, but it sets up Abby's selfless act inspiring Ellie's as well in the epilogue of the game.
You sort of answered my question before I was even going to ask you. A big chunk of criticism um, that has been ascribed to this game is that it manipulates you into feeling certain emotions for characters we don't want to empathize with. Do you think this is so? This is like the dog, the pregnant girl,
Yeah,
characters calling out names, for people that you've just killed. My reaction to this is movies use manipulation all the time, and we don't complain about them at all.
right.
You know,
I'm not sure I would classify it as manipulation because manipulation has almost got like this evil sort of connotation to it, where it's like,
what's a thing in art? It's a thing with film.
right,
It
like they
happens.
look at your heartstrings and they force you to confront things that make you uncomfortable. And
Hmm.
one of those things that make you uncomfortable might just be that Abby's also a great woman, like Ellie, who's flawed, but you're rooting for her and that she has reasons for killing Joel. And you can empathize with her greatly. And it's a testament to how powerful the storytelling is in this game. And that's why I have no issue with or very little issues with the pacing and the switch to Abby is because they
Hmm.
want to give you ample time to empathize with her. And then you start empathizing with when those stories intersect, you empathize with all the characters and you reflect on it because they're dead, if not already, or they're going to die.
Hmm.
Even the smallest of characters. For example, when you, as Ellie, brutally stab that poor girl in the throat as you come up to the hospital who's playing Hotline Miami on a PSP,
Yeah,
mind you, or a
I was
PS.
like, it was a PSP. I'm like, oh my god, like it's about
There's
all the
also like
subliminal PS
yeah, there's,
PlayStations you can
there's
find.
also there's also a PS3 with like I think the like Uncharted game and Jack and Daxter, the other Naughty Dog games. I think it's pretty funny, and
It's very
they're
meta.
sprawl. Yeah, but then you see that girl in the same cutscene as Abby when she's at the hospital later or earlier before Ellie gets there.
Hmm.
And like you were saying, the enemies call out each other's names. I think something that was really sad. I'm not a dog person, but when you kill a dog, the trainer will like really start crying over their body and just be like, someone got my boy. It's not to manipulate you, I think, but it's really to start making you question what you're doing. And
What
you really questioning Ellie's quest, and that's what the game's about, because it's like, I am trying to resolve an act of brutal violence,
with violence?
but I am destroying so many more lives in the process. And at first, it feels so justified. It feels so good to stab these people in the throat. But at the end, and this is where it just works so beautifully, when Ellie and Abby are fighting each other and they have each other within inches of death, you should be horrified. You should
Yeah.
not want either of them to finish the job.
Well, for
And
different reasons, right? Like, because I feel talking about the ending. Well, before we get there, like with the manipulation thing, it's almost like well, it isn't because with the dog, for example, what has the game preconditioned you to think? This game has preconditioned you to think that dogs are a very annoying threat that you should dispatch of, you know, immediately. You know,
right,
these dogs will sniff you out, and so if you don't kill them, guess what? Or if you don't deal with them, you can't really sneaking by is made, I would imagine, harder with the dog nearby. So if you
It's
wanted to
much
go the passive route, it's near impossible, right? So
right.
in the sense, I don't. If I was playing and watching it, I did not feel bad for the dog. I did not feel bad for it. No, I don't. Because I don't think the game is telling you that you should be empathetic towards these people because because the game, it's not like the game allows you to not disable the dog. You're at the aquarium. The dog's gonna kill you, dude. So what do
Right.
you do in that situation? If you're Ellie, you're not gonna let Ellie. Um, Ellie does what Ellie would realistically do, and that's what this game is.
Right.
A lot of the criticism, or some people have been saying, a lot of people have been saying, oh, this game could have been made even greater, way better with player choice. No, that's not true. What you're
No.
playing is the characters. You
Yeah,
know.
no. You're not playing you, you're playing the characters, exactly. And I will say I think I may have misspoke. I don't think the game is, like, forcing you to empathize, but I
Hmm.
do think the game's just showing you, like, this is how it would work, and this is why it's so brutal. It's not saying
Yeah,
it with any of, like, negative attitude. Maybe a little bit of negativity, obviously, because it's the theme of the game, but yeah, it's definitely I it's not just detail, it's very intentional. It's not just to make you feel immersed, it's very intentional, and it connects to the theme of the game,
I
for
do
sure.
see instances of where it could feel repetitive. Revenge is bad. And that's where the outcry is for a lot of people, that it seems labored on. Whereas I feel like that might have been resolved for me. That might have been resolved if the story was more central to just the two of them. You know, or again, like talking about sequences. If you certainly feel like it was sequenced perfectly, but if I like to imagine, if the story was presented, if Joel's death wasn't really immediately at the beginning, um, it that again, of course, would have yielded an entirely different product. But I guess another question
Right.
I wanted to ask you before we talk about that specific ending, um, which character, in your opinion, was the weakest? And to give you time to think about it, mine would be two characters. I think Tommy and Mel. I think were um in my opinion, they weren't quote unquote weak, but they were the least, in my opinion, developed, and their actions to me just really kind of didn't make sense
Uh-huh.
in certain respects. Because with Tommy, my reasoning for Tommy is uh the very beginning, he's the one who's cautious about going in, without reinforcements, without numbers. He's worried about
Right.
Maria. Um, First of all, dude, I flat out thought they killed him twice. I didn't see that it was the butt of a gun. I thought they killed him with a knife. I thought they put a knife into his eye at the beginning of the game.
Yeah,
No. And I
it looks
thought,
like I
yeah.
thought the exact
And with Abby, I thought Abby shot him at the side of his head. I thought he's dead twice and then he lives. So at the
yeah,
beginning of the game, you got Tommy, who is hesitant, or appears to be hesitant, but then he goes in Rambo style by himself. Weird.
right,
Okay, and at the end of the game, when he's disabled, when he sees how destroyed Ellie is at that point, and he pressures her to going on this ridiculous goose chase to Santa Barbara, to throw everything behind. Like, he's the one now instigating the conflict. To me, that felt very frustrating for me, just to see Tommy
yeah,
like be this character that you know is supposed to be in conjunction with Ellie, is supposed to be now like the supporter. And then with Mel, to a lesser extent, I felt like, why is this pregnant woman, at least for me, why is this pregnant woman, visibly pregnant woman, going into war zone when
right,
everyone around her is saying don't do it? You know?
right. That is yeah, so I've heard a lot of the complaints about Mel, and I think it's mainly because, her husband is out there, and she just doesn't
Hmm.
know where he is, and, when you get reports that your husband's gone AWOL,
You
of
do
course
whatever
you're
you
gonna want
can.
to
Yeah.
investigate, but yeah, it is a little weird to see a visibly pregnant woman, fighting and killing and stuff, but you really only get there on day 1. Then you'll drop her off at the aquarium. But,
Yeah.
Tommy, I think Tommy, who's a great character, by the way, I love Tommy, but, he's really supposed to foreshadow the route that Ellie could have gone down, right? And that she eventually does, right, with the ending, but it's a little different. Yeah, Tommy turns into this really sour, bitter old man almost. We all kind of know that person in our lives. And it's because that revenge, he let it eat him up in the inside, and it cost him not only half his face, but his relationship with Maria, because it's eating away at him, and she knows it too. And the
Right, right. Yeah, I forgot
foreshadow
that.
what will happen to Ellie if Tommy successfully guilt tripped her. And that's another thing. Tommy
Tommy was
Tom
successful.
manipulating Ellie is disgusting, and it's really bad, and that
Yeah.
it does frustrate you, but it doesn't frustrate me in terms of the writing, but it just frustrates me in terms of the character. I'm like, "Oh, Tommy, like, look what happened to you, man." And I think it's pretty real, and I was so into it. And then obviously, like I said, it foreshadows what happens to Ellie. Like, Ellie
Yeah.
knew full well what she was doing and what the consequences were gonna be. We can get to that ending
On this
soonish.
ridiculous journey too, and before we, were there other characters that you felt were weak, or which areas could have been omitted
So
to either create a tighter narrative or give more light to other characters?
I will just say Manny seemed like the one that easily you could eliminate the, uh like, he's the most I won't say useless, but I think he's the weakest in terms of, like, what he adds to the
Yeah.
narrative. For me, he just serves as good funny banter because he's kinda sex crazy and, he's
Hmm.
like a macho man. I think he might be a little example of some forced diversity, although, it's a Latino character, so I'm all about it. But, and I think he might he's just kind of a friend to get killed
Yeah.
by the other person. It's the same type of role as Jesse with Ellie. I just don't think he's executed as well. I find
It's
his
Jesse.
accent a little annoying, but I still found him necessary to the story. He
Man.
serves those roles, but that's about all he does for me.
Hmm.
But it didn't bother me that much.
It's a little sad that once I saw the minute first frame Jesse enters, like I kind of had this feeling, and dude, they're gonna kill this Asian guy off. Like, okay, full disclosure, I'm Asian. Okay, like I'm so used to seeing it, but in this game, the game got me in the sense that I wanted to know this character more, But I realized that shoot, if Jesse's here and they have this thing of wanting to live between the two of them, between Dina and Ellie, raising it, or just being on a farm. Shoot, Dina's pregnant. Jesse's probably gonna die.
Yeah.
I felt like the game could have, this is where restructuring certain other parts might have made it stronger in the sense that Jesse might have been realized more as a character if other parts were tighter. Jesse would have been given, not that what he was given was um inconclusive, or what he was given wasn't good. It's just like the game teased me enough to where I wanted more, and he gets killed and whatnot. I sort of saw that coming as soon as I saw
Mm.
him. Like he was a very well acted. By the way, performances. I can't gush enough about these guys and how much work they put in to flesh out these characters. Um,
Yeah, the performances are phenomenal in this game, and I will
Absolutely
say,
phenomenal.
I think Naughty Dog, because there's obviously a DLC in the first game, that fills in a big plot hole in the first game. Everyone's like, "What the hell? How did Ellie care for Joel while he was in a coma?" And then the DLC is like, "Oh, here's Ellie free Joel, and this is how her story with how she discovered she was immune, and then here is how she cared for Joel." I think we might be getting a DLC for this game that's
Mm.
either A, about Tommy's lone wolf journey or Jesse's lone wolf journey, because both of them are lone wolves that show up pretty conveniently and to assist the story and Ellie and our characters. And I would love to play as both of them because there's a lot of potential there for those characters as well. So
Well,
I
shoot,
really like.
I was gonna ask you that after we went after the ending, but no, it's okay. It's good. We'll think about it in a little bit, but kind of steering us towards the actual ending. Like, okay, by ending I mean conflict. The fight, everything leading up to the fight. So Ellie going into the Rattler's den, quote unquote. You know, if it
Mhm.
hadn't, interesting take. Like, if Ellie had decided to let this go, Abby would have died in the most excruciating kind of way.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
She gets tortured and crucified.
Basically, yeah.
You know,
Same as Lev. Both of them, they were suffering like crazy.
yeah.
And it yeah, so that's why I love that Ellie goes back because even though it's for selfish reasons, it turns toward a selfless resolution,
I don't think
and
Ellie
that's
sees it that way though. Like, you know, what is your okay? Here's the official question: is what is your feeling slash take on Ellie by the end of the game? Do you think she is spent, is meant to be this wayfaring stranger forever, or has she gained wisdom to the point where she can build herself back up?
I yeah, so just for those that are listening that may not be familiar, Ellie saves Abby and then
Hmm.
remembers that, this woman killed Joel. So she threatens to kill Lev if Abby does not fight her. And
So,
Abby successfully gets and they're fighting on this gorgeous, gorgeous set piece of a lakefront immersed
mhm.
in fog. It's so good. And Ellie gets Abby under the water and she's drowning her. And at the very last minute, Ellie gets a flashback of Joel that we have never seen. She just sees Joel on a porch with a guitar and decides to let Abby go free. And
Mhm.
most people think, and I'm in the same boat, that it is because she realizes that all is not lost and that she can rebuild herself and that forgiveness is the key and that the cycle of revenge has led to them destroying each other's lives. And I think she sees a little bit of her and Joel in Abby and Lev.
Mhm.
And then other people argue that she's just really spent, kind of like how James was asking me. And then in the ending, Ellie returns to the farm where her, Dina, and her child were residing, and it's completely deserted.
Oh, that broke me.
That
I hated that. Like I watched that. I was like, oh no.
I just felt really bad
I was
for
so
for.
empty, you know.
I will say I do wholeheartedly believe that Ellie is on her way back to Jackson at the end of the
Probably.
game. I refuse to believe that she's like this wayfaring like stranger type figure now. I really want her to go back and make things right with Dina. Because I think the game is hinting toward that because Abby gets to make things right with Lev and go on. And it only makes sense that because they parallel each other, that Ellie gets to do the same with Dina. So that's what I
Probably.
think. I think Ellie sees, Joel and Ellie from a different life in Abby and Lev, and that's why she decides to forgive her. And also, it's because then we find out that the last conversation, and this preludes the ending of the game,
Hmm.
the last conversation Ellie ever had with Joel before he died was that she attempted to forgive him for.
She was attempting to forgive him. Yeah. Like I think I can try. You
She
know.
never said- Yeah, she said, "I think I can try." I think that's really important. She never fully did it, which is why it's so regretful and why she's so torn up, and it's why she needs to let Abby know that she forgives her to a certain
Yeah.
degree.
My opinion when I saw Ellie, it was so gut wrenching. You know, there's a lot of stuff about that fight. It's so bloody. First of all, realistically, Ellie, Abby, fighting. You saw her body mass was totally different. She actually like she looked quote unquote like you know at that point in the game I was like okay there's probably no way that this is this could end well for Abby because she's exhausted and just realistically Ellie lands so many knife cuts on her. The
Oh, yeah.
blood loss would kill you anyway. Ellie doesn't
Yeah.
need to drown her, if we're realistically just all that stuff, but just, that fight, thinking about it now, and this is a week out from, about a week out from seeing it, and it just doesn't sit well with me. Like, and as it shouldn't, right? Like seeing Abby bite the fingers off, and so Ellie now can't play guitar anymore. That's I mean first thing, but just just like different things. Them like because I don't think Abby was really trying to kill Ellie. I think it was more Ellie trying to kill Abby at that point. Would you say, or were the both of them actually trying to kill each other?
They were definitely trying to kill each other. I think it makes sense for the story. Like, basically, this is the last straw. They have to kill each other if this were a traditional revenge plot that ends with a less than desirable ending, and that's where revenge is taken and violence is begotten.
Hmm.
They were definitely trying to kill each other because,
Yeah.
Ellie almost did, and Abby certainly could have as well. I think Abby certainly had the will to. That's why she decided to fight. Not just because obviously Lev's life was in question, but because,
Hmm. I think
yeah,
if Lev hadn't been there, Ellie would have done it. I think there's a lot of things that you know. I mean, just not even from a story writing perspective, just a character in general. Like, shoot, if that character's alone, what loss is there? Then the redemption arc. the redemption slash revenge arc would make more sense, you know. But because Lev's there, she just knows like, okay, this is I'm basically almost doing the same thing Joe's doing. I've already done the same thing Joe and Abby did. I've destroyed a lot, you know, which is why I felt like when Ellie lets her go, she wins. In my opinion, at that point in time, my immediate reaction was, "Thank God, she's won."
Yes,
You
I
know.
was gonna say it, or maybe not for the same reason, but I was so anxious the entire fight. I was like, I really don't want them to kill each other because I loved both of them at this point. I really empathized with both of them completely.
Mm-hmm.
And the moment that she lets her go, like, oh my god, the tension in my body just released, and I was just like, thank the Lord. I was like, I'm so glad they're not gonna kill each other because I really wanted them both to make it out, and I was very satisfied with that resolution.
Because like
I
she in if she had killed Abby, she would have also had to kill Lev because there's no way like she knows at this point she knows, you know. Which Abby interestingly enough, there's this whole you know their first interaction besides Joel's death is them in that theater. And Ellie points out, "Yeah, I'm the girl that your dad was going to operate on. I'm the reason."
Mhm,
I think you have to also consider maybe that in Abby's mind, if I kill this girl, we really are screwed for like forever. Like if we weren't already screwed before, Ellie like being the only visibly immune person, you know, like do you think that
mhm.
was a part of Abby's psyche at all? Do you think either A, the character the writers put that as an intention in her head, or do you think realistically she'd be thinking that the entire time? You know, if I kill this person, we are way more screwed than we already are currently, which is immensely, you know.
I think at first it's very clear in the flashback that Abby trusts her father's ability to reverse engineer a vaccine.
Hmm.
But I think time, not only the loss of hope from her father being dead, but just her time with the WLF as the Fireflies disband reveals to her that that probably wasn't the case.
Mm,
And we know that's not why she's mad. She's not mad because of the loss of the cure. She's mad because her father was killed, and that's very abundantly clear to me. So
yeah.
that's I don't think, when
Her
Ellie's like,
world was her father.
I
You
think,
know?
well, because Ellie doesn't know that Joel killed Abby's father. All Ellie knows is that Abby is the next
Oh,
Firefly. So that's what she's assuming. She's going, "Oh shit, like these are the people that wanted me as a
oh, that's a
cure."
good point. Ellie's never made
Yeah.
aware of the true nature. Which honestly, dude, the first time I was thinking about ways that Joel was gonna get killed. Like he's probably gonna get killed by whoever had a relationship with the Fireflies. Like
That's the
honestly, like that was the whole thing. My gut, my and Ellie even writes it in her journal. You know, my gut has been saying it this entire time. And what we don't know as players or as watchers is like this whole game, Ellie is made fully aware of Joel's actions. We, in the entire time, think, okay, when does this reveal happen? You know, and it's at the very or in the middle of the game where Ellie goes back to the hospital and like she finds an audio recording of them basically, you know, even if we were to find another immune person, the only person who could have done it is dead. Yeah. So that's
theoretically. It's never
theoretically.
it's definitely left in the dark as to whether the vaccine could ever be made. It's
Mm-hmm.
never like thrown out the window, but it's never fully endorsed either.
Which
So
science? Yeah, it's not endorsed by people of the science community either.
yeah,
Like what they should have
I,
done was take blood samples and just like continue to
yeah.
going there. To kill her is just
Well,
you know
within the game, obviously, I think it's important that they don't reveal whether, it was a risk. That's the whole point.
right.
Is
Yeah,
is
it
that
was a gigantic risk.
and it's about how you're gonna react to that chance. And that's part of the more of the first game than the second game. Uh,
That's
but
where I
yeah,
have to
it's just
respect this game, man. I that's where I have to respect this game and the fact that a lot of games they don't. It's like they go off on a completely different, storyline that is unrelated to the people saying that this game is unrelated to the first. I don't see how that's true at all. I objectively cannot see how you could say that
no,
because
no,
this game is a direct consequences, right? Consequence. It's a
right.
direct correlating consequence of the biggest action slash at the climax of the game of the first game. You know, it's where we are
Hmm.
today. You know?
Yeah, it's an absolute result of the first game, and it's the same exact universe of the first game, just more refined and more matured. So it does feel like a I will go to my deathbed. This game feels like a tried and true sequel, and I didn't think they could do that with Last of Us 1. I thought The Last of Us 1 had a ceiling that was just so high, it set the bar so
Hmm.
high that it could not be surpassed in any way besides gameplay, but I really do think this is a true successor to its predecessor, although I will agree it's not as tight structurally
Yeah.
as the first game. The first game is very focused, it's laser focused, but, when you get more creative, when you get more messy and you dive deeper into that gray area between good and evil, you know,
Hmm.
light and dark, you're gonna get more messy and you're not gonna be as focused. But I think it worked for this game
Yeah.
because they tie all those loose ends. There's not really any loose ends when this game ends, if you think about it. It's either left up to interpretation or it's been solved because, to be fair, a lot of the ends that would be ends are dead
Hmm.
because a lot of people die in this game.
Yeah. And yeah, there's being her kind of being this stranger forever just kind of doesn't resonate well with me at all. Like I can't sit here and eat that up like at all. Just the fact that some people think that Ellie's like logistically, where is Ellie gonna go, dude? Like she knows Jackson is. Who knows? At that point in time, Jackson um may be under attack. Which is one of the things I would have maybe liked to see if they didn't pursue this particular storyline, and maybe would have taken away from the fact from this being an actual like true a sequel. Quoting you, like you see all the children at the beginning of the game. You see civilization. God, you even see Gustavo as like a the composer of the game, like playing his banjo at the beginning of the game. It's like, oh, so they're showing all this. This probably means these people are gonna die. Like I was at the very beginning of the game. I thought there's a conflict here that's gonna be really messed up, and that's
Right.
true, just not at Jackson. You know,
Yeah, yeah,
you
yeah,
know.
for sure.
Before we go into just future of this franchise, I'm gonna guess that you rate this game pretty much perfect. It's a perfect game for you.
Yeah, I have, I like to say I have a pretty solid rating system. I do from 1 to 10 with half points, and
Hmm.
I've only had, I think, 5 10 out of 10s up until Last of Us 2, and that was Last of Us 1, Disco Elysium, Minecraft, Undertale, and, oh god, how could I forget my 5th 10? But, yeah, Last of Us 2 absolutely joins that. I give it a 10
Hmm.
out of
10 out of
and a 10
10.
for me doesn't mean like it's flawless, like
Right.
mechanic. It just means the pros just significant whatever cons there may be, the pros far exceed the
For you,
cons.
yeah, it executed it for you. And like for me,
Absolutely.
I can't rate this game yet because I have not picked up a joystick. I have not picked up a controller and played it. I've only experienced it from a narrative, which I regret now. But I mean, the one PS4 game I have played is God of War. I don't regret that at all. Like
Mhm.
if you had to choose, like it's a pretty solid choice. So yeah, Last of Us 2, story and gameplay. That's see guys, there's a way to talk about it without
In each
trying to
other's face.
kill each other, like no pun intended. So yeah, good. But if I had to maybe, I mean, compare the two, Last of Us 1, yeah, 1 was definitely tighter. I mean, even you can agree, right? Like story wise, characters,
Yeah.
and like
Oh yeah, it's
I
tighter.
guess intention. Like, and was it a shorter game?
Absolutely. It is not even half the
Yeah,
length of the second one. If this most recent playthrough of mine took like 12 hours.
yeah.
So it could be half the length of Last of Us 2, but
And it
it's
definitely, Last of Us 2 definitely has, for you, and definitely for me, it has replayability factor, right? Like
oh yeah.
when would you revisit it though? Because for me, I wanna let this sit, I wanna
Oh,
for some time.
absolutely. I'm gonna let this sit. It's like
I
in the
can't play it right
fall
away again.
game. Avengers Endgame was such a big deal for me that I had to take a break from comic books and movies for like 2 weeks because I was just so shook by the movie. I also kept watching the movie. I watched it 4 separate times within 2 weeks of its release. So, but, it's not as easy
Hmm.
to So for Last of Us 2, this being my favorite game of all time, I just really need to sit with me. I haven't turned on the PlayStation since I beat it. I
Huh.
haven't played it on my PC. I just I'm really waiting till it feels right
Mm-hmm.
to go plat the game because I know I collected like I'd estimate about 70% of the collectibles naturally. I want to go back through it. I want to know that I don't have to conserve ammo anymore because I have a good outline of the plot, and I don't want to spend a lot of time looking for collectibles anymore. I just want to just go straight to the action, straight to the gameplay, and enjoy it even more because it is so much more fun without
Yeah.
having the focus there. Because now you can be a little more liberal with your shots. You know what's coming, and that might be within 2 weeks, 3 weeks. I think I'll certainly revisit it. The Last of Us I've replayed 6 times. The Last of Us One,
Wow.
from 13 to 2020, and Last of Us Two. I can certainly see myself replaying. I definitely want to go through on Survivor. That'll be a true test of my. And if they add a DLC difficulty like Last of Us One did as well, Last of Us One added grounded difficulty in DLC,
Yeah, that's what I
where it
thought this game had. This game doesn't have grounded.
does not have grounded. Grounded was DLC. So I believe if
What
they
is
go to
grounded? If you get
grounded
shot, you're
is
dead, right?
yeah, it's Survivor on steroids. There's no resources. You have like no option but to non-lethal sneak past everything. There's so little ammo in the game. Enemies, more enemies. They're harder. It's it is absurdly difficult, but it's like that perfect balance of like a great challenge.
Yeah, that'll make you actually hate the game for
Yeah,
a
that
number
makes
of
you.
different reasons.
Yeah.
Yeah, for me, I really want to explore this. I'm going to let it sit because the narrative is still maybe. Damn, this is where I wish I had the ability to play it, just because like the finality of playing something like this, like a game that's this influential. Just like, yeah. No, but okay. So that's been The Last of Us. These next small little questions I have are for the future. You know, future of this
Mhm.
franchise. So you mentioned DLC a little earlier. Hey, um, knowing what I know about this game and seeing maybe not just the reaction of the community, but also just reasonably speaking from like a story perspective, do you think it's going to have DLC? And if they do, what would you like to see really explored? Like if it was up to you, what would you
Uh,
make?
yeah. So, my apologies. I didn't know you were gonna ask this question. That's why I touched
No,
on it
you're good.
earlier.
You're good. I love that you touched on it. It jogged my memory.
I I can't say I honestly expect DLC because I can only imagine the team is so overworked and
Spent. Yeah, it's gonna be a while.
however, I do expect a remaster for the PlayStation 5, and if that's
Hmm.
the case, they can't just make the game pretty and then resell it for a full 60.
Really?
There has to be something there because it's so recent, right? You don't remaster a game after less than a year just because of a new
Oh, I
console
think it's gonna
generation.
be more like 5 or 4, depending on when the PS5 hits its prime, right? Because when did the remaster for the first game come
Remaster
out?
of Last of Us 1 came out less than a year after Last of Us 1. It came out, I think, enough
Um,
2014, but not a full year after the
Even
release of the
that's
first.
gonna take a while, wouldn't it? Just like the hardware and like,
Yeah.
yeah.
So, but here's the other thing, the other part of the puzzle you're missing is Last of Us 1 had a great multiplayer mode. I still play the multiplayer to this day, and I was very sad to hear that Last of Us 2 was not gonna feature the factions multiplayer. My crazy theory, and I don't really believe in it, but it would absolutely make 2020 the best goddamn year on earth despite all the shit, is if Naughty Dog comes out with a multiplayer mode for Last of Us 2 because there's so many weapons and gadgets. They've upgraded the arsenal so much more in this game compared to the really simplified arsenal of Last of Us 1 multiplayer.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And the game just plays the multiplayer plays so well. It's like CS:GO type, no respawns, very intense combat with crafting, so there's loot stations all around the map. You open them up, you
Mm.
get blade, binding, bandages, and you can make Molotovs and stuff to toss at each other. And there's great shooting objective modes. I don't think it'll happen. Neil Druckmann has stated that, like, this game I think he stated last year that it was just so too much to try to incorporate multiplayer,
Mm-hmm.
and so that would blow my mind. But in terms of DLC, I do think that if they're gonna remaster this game within a year like they did for 1, they have to include some type of DLC with the package if they're going to charge a full $60. If
Was
they
the
do something like
remaster $60?
yes, it was a full-on
Whoa, I
game.
did not know that. I thought it was gonna be like 30 or 35
Well,
or
like I
something.
said, it had multiplayer and it had all the DLC included, grounded mode,
Right, 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 right.
player. and because the multiplayer had 2 DLC packs, maps and weapons,
Mm.
um, and there was the campaign DLC Left Behind, which, by the way, is only like 2 hours. It's super short. These DLCs are very
But
short for life.
it's still stuff to play, you know, like.
It's still quality. It's
Mhm.
fantastic. I'm not a big, quantity over quality guy, but, I'm just saying, like, as a package, if you're gonna charge $60, you have to
The
bring
price tag
something.
has to be warranted somehow, you know.
Absolutely. And I don't think Naughty Dog has never done any economically slimy practices with their game like studios like
No.
EA and such. So I think they're fully capable of doing something like that. Maybe I really want DLC. I really want to either play as Jesse or Tommy, or maybe I don't think they would continue Ellie or Abby's story, but it'd be nice to know another dimension probably. But yeah, so that's my hopes for the future of the game.
Mhm. Like, okay, when you said something along the lines of either more Jesse or Tommy. To this is where I really don't know what I want, man. Because the follow up question to this is, man, what's next for these characters? Like, it's kind of hard to think at this moment in time, like, what's next for someone like Ellie? Like, do you think we need to see more of her, or should this be the lasting image of her? Because you said earlier something about this, um, something about The Last of Us 2 kind of making it almost into a universe. In your opinion, are you comfortable with that? Or like should there be somewhat of a finality to things? To me, biased opinion, dude, I want to see more of Ellie. I don't want to leave her. I don't want her to be. I don't want that to be the lasting image. You know, even if she dies a heroic death in the next one, sure. Just please, you know. But that's just me being, emotionally biased. But
Yeah. Yeah, I'm very attached to Ellie as well. I think, Neil Druckmann, he's already talking about the potentiality for a third one versus a new IP. I really think Naughty Dog has to do a new IP. They've worn out Uncharted, and I think with this game, they really have worn out Last of Us because the resolution is damn near perfect for me, and I really don't want them to further the story. I think the universe they set up with this game was strictly to serve this story because the universe they set up for this game, the Scars versus the WLF, and the characters at war with each other, was all to serve the theme of revenge and conflict and
mm-hmm,
violence begetting violence. So I think, and it all gets resolved. Isaac's dead. Haven is effectively burned to ashes. So I don't think they can do much more with that, and I wouldn't want them to. I'd rather have them focus their sights on a new IP. So yeah, I think this if I had a bit money, I think this is the end of The Last of Us for Naughty Dog, and that makes me pretty happy. Not that I hate the game, obviously. I love the game; it's my favorite game, but I think I
mm-hmm.
really like it's resolved. And yeah, it is a little disheartening to see Ellie not as like a princess happy ending, but I think
Well, not
that's
even a Prince's happy ending, because like you could kind of infer from this game that she could meet if they do decide to um further, because just the fact that she is still immune. It's not like she
right.
isn't still immune though. So there is you wouldn't be you wouldn't be bummed at them saying that they're gonna make another one, right? Like you'd probably take it. You
I wouldn't
would
be
you?
bummed. I would be like, whoa, but like I think it really should end here
Yeah,
if they keep this level of quality. I trust Naughty Dog, but it'd be really hard to top this one after this story with
yeah.
these same.
But at
It
the
would
same
be
time, there's that other crowd of people that are like, I feel like it could kind of unite both circles if they do. It's kind of like, hey, like, well, not in the sense of give the people what they want, because the people, I'm of the camp that people don't know what they want. They really don't.
I'm
If you're the
camp.
chef, you are, you're the artist, you curate, and it goes
Right.
on from there. In regards to them changing things in the remaster or doing something, I both hope I hope they don't. I hope they don't change the sequencing of events, which I feel like they could do. But for the very same reason that I want, that a lot of us want George Lucas to release the negatives of Star Wars, the original Star Wars, you know, because like this is a guy that's been known to change so many different things. And there's that. I feel like with art, you have to let the original thing, the original version of something last. You know,
Mm.
which is a complicated question, because for me, um, with DLC, it's just Yeah, me personally, I want to see more. I can't take the fact that if it is okay, cool. It's been a very interesting human experience. Um, but we do know something else that is coming out. Supposedly it's announced and is in the works. There's an HBO series
Right.
on the rise. And how do you feel about that? So what you know so far is Craig Mazin, the writer of Chernobyl and the director of Chernobyl, the
Hmm.
Chernobyl series, which I thought was one of the. I did a podcast on it, as with Joseph
It's like
Losay. It was so. I think Chernobyl last year was the best thing I saw. Aside from other movies, Craig Mazin is the writer and the director doing the flagship, and HBO is doing the series. How do you feel about that?
so I will say I know Naughty Dog and HBO have had some type of relationship
Mm-hmm.
before because a writer of Westworld, one of the main writers of Westworld, co-wrote Last of Us 2 with Druckmann.
Was it Gross?
It, I have no idea,
Haley
unfortunately.
Gross? And
Oh, maybe
when you say writing the Last of Us, you mean the Last of Us 2 or the first game?
Last of Us 2.
Okay, yeah. And then it's
He
Gross, yeah. Gross.
yeah.
Haley Gross or something. Yeah.
This I
Okay.
am excited to become a series. I am so ecstatic. I don't think the writers have much to do because the games are so expertly written, you know? I don't wanna be cliche, but I genuinely do believe this is hard to mess up. The writing here is so tight, at least for the first one. The casting choices are gonna be so exciting to see. I just hope that they keep this core dynamic between Joel and Ellie, and then, if they're gonna do Last of Us
Hmm.
Part
Interesting.
really great to see how they do it this time. If it's a series and not a game, they might interweave the days of Seattle. Like instead of doing day 1, 2, 3 Ellie, day 1, 2, 3 Abby, they might do day 1 Ellie, day 2 Abby, day 2 Ellie, day 2 Abby, things like that. Because now there's no gameplay to worry about messing.
Interesting.
If they had to dramatize and make this into a show or a high quality production, which I have all the faith in the world in HBO taking this on. HBO has just been knocking it out of the park. They have True Detective, Westworld,
I mean,
Chernobyl,
Game of Thrones aside, season 8,
yeah,
but
yeah,
that's the only
yeah.
detractor I can think of. You kind of hit on something interesting. Like, do you think the series or should the series attempt to connect any of the bridges slash interpret the game we've already played? What comes to mind is Netflix's The Witcher, right? As
Right.
as from what I hear, yeah, we're getting Geralt. We're seeing Geralt, we're seeing Yennefer, all these different characters. I Do you think they should reinterpret Ellie, and Joel and what we already know, or continue Ellie's story in that form and not make another game, or do you think there's potential for them to cut away to an entirely different geological location? Maybe explore a completely different structure.
I think that they should stick with what we already have
Mm-hmm.
because that's what the fans see. And I just think making it into a show would add a whole new dimension to it. And it's really a story that I want a lot more people to know about outside of the gaming arena. Or I know a lot of people outside of, gamer culture know about this game.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to not know Last of Us and especially Last of Us 2. There are so many websites covering Last of Us 2 that I never expected to, things like The Guardian and Forbes and whatnot, because it's making so
Yeah.
much
Dude, Forbes covers
headlines.
Borderlands. It's so funny what Forbes does.
Really,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's fun. I didn't know that. But I want this game, this IP to become a household name. I want it to be treated like Chernobyl, like Westworld, like Game of Thrones pre-season 8, where it's just like these household titles that everyone knows for being phenomenal productions. Uh, it's so exciting, especially because video games have so many good stories, but they never, with the exception of like Detective Pikachu and Sonic, they never translate well to the
Yeah.
screen.
And
Or any, I've heard which is good, but I haven't seen it personally.
with the lineup that I see, I mean Chernobyl, like Craig Mazin and the director of that, and then yeah, HBO and Naughty Dog. Just the idea of them making a movie kind of makes more sense. It kind of shifts attention away. Like I don't know how much Naughty Dog is going to be. Do you think Naughty Dog is directly involved or just kind of passively involved as producers or overseers? Like, how do you
I
see
think
that playing out?
I think Neil Druckmann is involved, not Naughty Dog necessarily.
Druckmann,
Naughty
okay.
Dog, programmers and other game devs that have nothing to do with TV production. Druckmann is the creative director. He's the one that oversees the artistic aspects of it, and I
Mm-hmm.
think he'll be directly involved because this is really his story. This is his baby. These are
Yeah.
his 2 babies. Last was 1 and 2, And I think while this is show, Neil Druckmann might, you know, leave to do work on the production. I think
I think
Naughty
for
Dog's
his
gonna
health, he might actually do it. He might actually leave this to someone else or make the old
well,
writer come
yeah.
back.
Yeah, I mean, when this is your baby, you're gonna want them to do it justice. So it's just about how
Yeah.
much you trust them. I have complete faith. I have the same amount. I'd wager that I have the same amount of faith in HBO to make this production that I did with Naughty Dog 2 to make Last of Us 2 great. Like it's a safe bet for me. I have no anxious feelings about it. And at the same time, I think Naughty Dog's gonna start shifting their focus toward a new IP, which I
I'm
really
interested
am
to
curious.
see. Has there been any rumors that you've known about to come out about? I
No,
mean,
no,
yeah, this year is so rough for like actual production on games. Like we're probably gonna see a delay in so many
I
different.
mean, Cyberpunk just got delayed again. It'll be like
Is
8
it
years now.
2021?
Yeah, I think or no, I have no idea. I
You know
think
what? I'm okay. I'm okay with them. If a delay for them means a the game is going to be the game is what they want it to be, and two it means that the developers can sleep a little more. I'm for it, dude. Like
yes.
take all the time in the world. You can get this into the next year. I don't think there's like, cause especially for I mean, a lot of people in the camp that Last of Us 2 isn't great, right? Like, make a game good. You know, the good
Sure.
will outlast the time that people have been waiting for. You know, with Half Life Alex is
Absolutely.
the same way. Like, people didn't expect this game to come out at all. It's great.
Yeah. I think the same is said for Last of Us 2 because it obviously got delayed from February of this year all the way to June. It got delayed 3 times.
Yeah,
February to May to June. Yeah. And
man.
then or fall of 2019 to February 2020 to May 2020 to June 2020. It was horrible being a fan, just endless delays. Uh
Yeah,
I think the same can be said for this game in terms of how it's going to leave the gaming community. No one's going to forget this game. In the
not
same way
really.
that no one has
Yeah,
forgotten Skyrim, no one has forgotten Half-Life 2. I think this is a classic, like tried and true. Like no one will forget it. Maybe not a classic like for everyone because obviously it's so divisive, but this is going to make an impact. It has
yeah,
already flying off the shelves. It's doing what Last of Us 2 did and showing people like, yo, video games can really do the narrative in their
yeah.
own special way that movies or TV just can't touch.
I also think
I really
it's unfortunate that man, of all the years for this particular game to come out, this year was just the worst, possibly the worst circumstantial year for a Last of Us game to come out. So, because you can imagine if if either they'd have delayed it into 2021, which man, I don't even want to think about because Naughty Dog and their developers just like mental toll on these developers to make this game, you know, because there's so
oh yeah.
much. I look at the animation, it's like I feel guilty almost for enjoying this. I feel guilty for enjoying these beautiful landscapes. Who knows how, you know, because I've worked, you know, I've worked. If you worked in video editing or media production before, my God, the chain of approval, it just the amount of time it takes to make a 2 minute sequence, a 2 second sequence, a 30 second
Oh yeah.
sequence. You know, it's just but it's just unfortunate. I think to put you have to put in perspective the effect this year has had on people, right? Politically, and then um COVID-19 and a viral outbreak, a game about a viral outbreak. Like, oh my, it's just like the perfect storm for people to react horribly, embarrassingly to this game. You know, whereas suppose if it had come out last year, I don't think it would have if the leaks hadn't been such a big deal, if there were no leaks and there was no coronavirus, I don't think we'd be seeing the reaction that we see. You know?
Yeah, I will say the leaks really did a number on this game, man, because as soon as the leaks came out, and as we all know, the leaks were like half truths.
Yeah,
They got some Joel does die at the hands of a woman named Abby that is spared by Ellie. But Abby's trans and there's all this woke, false woke injection
hmm,
allegations. It really did a number on the game. The game's still flying off the shelves. It's breaking sales
yeah,
records, so it didn't affect it that much. But the review bombing, it just leaves a bad taste in my mouth. But yeah, I think it's all this tension built up by the quarantine period and
yeah.
such that's really doing a number on this game as well.
By the way,
Unfortunately.
I have no problem with someone saying they outright hate this game. You have a right to. You know, you have a right to like dislike a lot of things, but it's this thing of objectively discussing it, which I feel for the most part, um, more well-known slash legitimate YouTubers and critics have kind of done. Donkey did a pretty, you know, well thought out one. Jim Sterling, I don't know if you follow him at all. Jim Sterling, Jim Quisitions, Jim Pressions. Yeah, he did a review for it, which was fair. You know, if you're a critic or whatnot, this is what I want the gaming community, because it's very. Would you agree? It's a very almost immature group. Feel
I
very
will
very
say,
entitled to a lot of things.
I will
You know,
say, the more and more. So I used to be on the team of the gaming community. I used to be, the critics are paid off. They don't know what they're talking about. Any AAA title is going to get at least a 7. Um, I now kind of am appreciative of that because the gaming community is so polarizing, and I've discovered, I don't think they know what they want.
no,
And I'm not trying to make anyone feel insulted, but like, you know, it's not like we're all aging at the same time. There's still a bunch of new
yeah,
injections
that's
into the
true.
gaming community. There's still a lot of young people. And like I said, this game, I'm fine with, like, if I were a father, I'm fine with my son playing Call of Duty, Black Ops, 17 or whatever. I would not want my child to play this game. This game is so damn heavy.
Until 18 or until like a certain age.
It's
Yeah,
so heavy.
yeah.
I'm surprised I even got through Last of Us 1 as a 14-year-old. That game's heavy as hell too.
I
Like,
can't
there's
imagine
just
you were eight.
emotion.
You were 14 then, man. I was kind of showing my age here
Dude,
a little bit. I was 18 at that times. At that point, but you know, it's we really can't. You're right. We really can't control the rate at which players experience. Because me, I I don't think my parents knew what they were doing, but in second grade, to motivate me to study, what they did was, it was after tutoring and whatnot. It was a Saturday. I remember it so clearly. I got in the car, and the first thing they did was they placed the Half-Life anthology pack onto my like lap and say, "Yeah, James, we got this for you because we feel you've been doing good." Man, no second grader in 2002 should be playing Counter Strike or Half-Life. You know,
Yeah, no way.
it's just like, yeah, but by that same token, it's just like you can't you can't control um what these players are gonna at what age, but or you can't control the reaction of the younger crowd. But where my disappointment has been with the community is with the older crowd. you know not to name
Yeah.
drop or anything, but there are certain channels slash avenues out there that have demographically older people. Like, guys, I know you're perfectly at liberty to hate and not hate, dislike, or just not get the game, not have the game reach you. That's you. But it's just like mature conversation is an adult trait. You need to have it, in order to get through things. you know because, yeah, I saw this petition. Did you hear about the petition they had to like change the game? Like, oh, we waited 7 years, we have 15,000 signatures. Like, just
Yeah, no way.
I don't know. Some people may have signed it out of spite, and to be trolls. Um, yeah, that's we know the HBO series is coming out. Um, Aside from that, the only thing I want to mention is, again, just to reiterate, the performers. It's so good. The performances were just so great that at this point, for going forward, I want to see more of what they do. I want to see more of what Ashley Johnson does. You know,
Hmm.
or
Yeah,
like,
she knocked it out of the park.
yeah,
It's really showing how important voice acting, not only mocap, but voice acting is something that really needs to be respected.
mm-hmm.
They sell it, and it sells the game. It's
Yeah,
it's
Laura
such a
Bailey.
you have like 10 hours of cutscenes and even more of optional dialogue and character interactions within the game outside of cutscenes. It's really important that you hit it on the head and
Yeah.
knocked it out of the park.
One
Every
thing,
actor.
yeah, one thing you can watch. I don't know if you've seen this already, but supposedly, well, I went and saw it. Voice actor for Joel. Shoot.
Troy Baker.
Troy Baker. Troy Baker has his gaming channel with Nolan North. Yeah, go figure, right? Joel and freaking
Yeah.
Drake. He plays through The Last of Us 1, and he has all the cast come on. He has Neil, he has
Oh, I have seen this.
it I saw that at the exact right time that I needed to, man. It was such a cathartic thing for me to see them playing each other. It was so good. Just this past week I've been so emotionally wrecked by 2. It's just like, oh great. I see Ashley playing as Ellie, and that's a watch. Retro Replays, I think, is the game
Something
channel.
like that. I just recently watched as well.
So if anybody is still listening up into this long freaking cathartic conversation I've had with a guy that's actually played the game here, if you're looking for something to quell the emotion, that is something I'd recommend. Is Retro Replays. Troy Baker, he invites all the cast, or pretty much all the significant cast members of The Last of Us 1, and he plays through the game with Nolan North, who's Tim Drake, who's Drake, and Nathan Drake, sorry, and probably the most evil character in Last of Us 1, supposedly.
David, yeah,
and he nailed it. I couldn't even tell that was Nathan. Yeah, that's something to watch. And one more thing, Gustavo.
Oh man, this soundtrack is so. I would say this game, from the first reveal at E3, we knew it was going to be much darker.
Yeah.
But the soundtrack is so much more bleak. And
yeah. Oh yeah, you're
sad.
right. Because there's no, like, in the first game, you hear a lot of like electronic kind of
Yeah.
melancholy meditative music. This game, it's like war or depression. You know,
The main difference between the themes, like even from then, the theme in Last of Us 1 is very melodic and it's very soothing and optimistic and hopeful. And in this game, the theme is broken and
oblique. Yeah.
bleak. Neil Druckmann said, he's like, Last of Us 1 is about love, and Last of Us 2 is about hate. If you really want to break it down to the base components, and it's so visible from the story to the detail in the facial animations when someone's dying, to the themes, and then even the soundtrack serves as a vehicle to move the story. It's phenomenal. You can feel the love put into this game.
He's getting up there too, man. Like I'm kind of worried because, like, okay, this HBO series coming out. There is no other, I mean, okay, with this game, we also have to give credit to Mac Quay. Mac Quay also did a good soundtrack. I recognize Mac from Mr. Robot, if you've seen that. That's main.
I have not.
Whew, that's also a good one. Yeah, music, nothing to complain about. Honestly, it's gonna be in my rotation for a little bit. All right, and Aiden, do you have anything more to say? Anything more to add?
No, we covered a lot of stuff. I will say, I think one thing we missed is the amount of detail put into this game in terms of the actual combat, like the facial animations and
oh man, yes,
a detail that I really noticed, like really noticed.
Like, one thing there is, like, when the character, analog controls, right? So when you rotate around to see Ellie's face, when Ellie or either Abby, when they're moving in a certain direction, they kind of grimace. They kind of make this. I mean, it depends on the stage that you play, right? Like when Ellie wakes up from that dream with Joel, or not dream, that flashback with Joel at the museum, she has this like hurt in her face when she moves. Wow, that for me was very poignant.
For me, it's when Abby stealth kills people.
Yeah.
The neck pops out. I was like, no way.
Yeah. Yeah. There's so much more, but we've reached 2 hours and a half. It's wow. We've talked ourselves quite a bit.
Aiden, I could go 6 more hours, man. This is great.
Yeah, this has been great. Aiden, thank you so much for joining me, man.
Thank you for having me, man. This has been fantastic.
All right, guys. Well, that's been The Last of Us 2. At least our way of talking about it. You can pick it up today. And as Aiden would tell you, he recommends that you play it. I recommend that you play it because I didn't get to play it. If you have the option to play it, if you have a PS4, or if you want to wait it out, wait. At this point, if you've listened to this point, you haven't waited it out. I hope you haven't. I hope you haven't. Yeah, that I'd play this game again. Aiden, thanks for joining us, and that's been the Crunchy Take.
Having me, yeah.
See you, folks.